Whisper on a Leash, the day a dog spoke louder than words. It started as a routine safety day. Parents snapped photos. Kids jostled for prime selfie angles beside gleaming patrol cars. Officer Maya Torres rolled her eyes affectionately until her partner, Valor, the German Shepherd, halted mid-demonstration. His body stiffened. His amber eyes locked on a girl wheeled past, pale fingers clutching blanket edges like lifelines. One bark short, savage, unmistakable split the air. Gasps ricocheted off bulletin boards. Sorry, he must hate wheelchairs, the aunt joked, but Maya's pulse spiked. Valor had visited burn wards, rehab centers, even her father's nursing home without flinching. So why now? Why this girl? Before the day ended, Valor's agitation would follow Maya into sleepless hours, down rabbit holes of missing records and mismatched names. By the time the sun rose, she'd realized her K9 hadn't misbehaved. He translated a whisper the rest of them refused to hear. The gates of Maple Grove Elementary swung open under a late September sun, warm enough to whisper of summer, but with just enough crispness in the air to promise fall wasn't far behind. Bright orange streamers fluttered from the playground fence. Signs painted by second graders read, "Safety Day Rocks," in crooked, cheerful letters. The smell of freshly cut grass mingled with hot chocolate from the PTA booth and the faint musk of dog fur and leather collars. Lieutenant Maya Torres stood tall just beyond the staff parking lot, her uniform pressed, boots polished, sunglasses hiding the circles under her eyes. She had been up since 5. Her K9 partner Valor, a 6-year-old German Shepherd with a coat like burnished steel and a stare that could unnerve grown men, sat calmly by her side, calm but not relaxed. His ears twitched at the giggles of children already spilling onto the field in anticipation. His tail remained still. He was working. "Ready, boy?" Maya murmured, crouching beside him and giving the signal. Valor lifted his head slightly, then pressed his body against her thigh in acknowledgement version of a nod. Maya allowed herself the briefest of smiles. After 6 years, she didn't need words between them. He read her stress, her breath, the tension in her shoulders. And she read his silence, his stillness, his focus. Together, they'd tracked down missing hikers, intercepted drug mules, and on one long night last winter, saved an entire apartment building from a gas leak. But today? Today was about the kids. Lieutenant Torres called Principal Sutherland, waving her clipboard as she approached. "You're in zone between the fire truck and the bicycle safety tent. You good with a couple demos and maybe some petting time?" Maya gave a professional nod. "Of course. He's ready." As if on cue, Valor stood, his posture dignified but approachable. The moment they reached their tent, 3 children squealed and ran over, then paused, awestruck. "Can we pet him?" A little boy with a Spider-Man backpack asked, his hand frozen in midair. Maya crouched beside Valor, eyes level with the kids. "Only if he says it's okay. Let's ask him." "Ask him?" She gave a small click of her tongue. Valor responded by sitting, wagging his tail, deliberate, slow, measured. The kids grinned and rushed in, tiny hands reaching out to stroke the thick fur on his back. He tolerated it all patiently, only glancing once at Maya for silent permission to remain still. "His name's Valor," Maya told them, her voice calm but warm. "He's part of the Cedar Falls Police Department's K9 unit. He can detect explosives, find people lost in the woods, and even smell certain medications just by scent." Can he fight bad guys?" a red-haired girl asked breathlessly. "He can," Maya said, her tone shifting slightly. "But most of the time, he keeps people safe just by listening better than we do." Behind her sunglasses, Maya scanned the crowd. Teachers shepherded classes from station to station. The local fire chief was lighting up a smoke simulator to demonstrate escape techniques. Parents hovered with phones out, capturing every handshake between a K9 and a kindergartner. For a moment, everything felt normal. Too normal. Then she saw them. At the far end of the blacktop, just exiting the school building, a girl in a wheelchair moved slowly down the ramp. She was small, 8, maybe. Her skin was pale, her arms thin, and folded in her lap like she was afraid to take up space. Her brown hair was tied in a tight braid that tugged her scalp. Her eyes stared straight ahead, emotionless. She said nothing. Behind her stood Glenda Morell, mid-50s, with a wide smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and a cloud of perfume that could choke a daisy. She wore a blouse too tight at the chest and heels that clicked sharply against the concrete, practically dragging the girl forward. "Hi there," Glinda called cheerfully, "just trying to catch up with the doggy show." Valor's ears twitched. Then he froze. Maya felt it through the leash first, like a current had passed between them. Valor's body went from soft to stone in a breath. His gaze locked on the girl. Not on Glinda, not on the noise, not on anything else. "Valor," Maya said under her breath, a warning laced with uncertainty. Then came the growlo, deep, almost a vibration. A second later, Valor lunged. The leash snapped taut as Maya jerked back, planting her boots against the pavement. Valor barked short, violent, insistent bursts. His hackles rose, teeth bared, tail rigid behind him. A few children screamed. A teacher dropped her clipboard. One child burst into tears. "Valorno!" Maya hissed, yanking him backward. He fought her every inch. Glinda stumbled back, clutching the handles of the wheelchair. "What in God's name? What is wrong with that dog?" "I am so sorry," Maya managed, resting Valor into a sit position. He doesn't act like this. He must hate wheelchairs," Glinda snapped. "Some animals do. I've seen it." Maya blinked. That wasn't true. Valor had spent months in rehab centers. He loved her father, who used a wheelchair after his stroke. He had never once reacted like this. She turned to the girl Ivy. According to the name tag pinned to her shirtband, their eyes met. Just for a second. What Maya saw wasn't fear, not even curiosity. It was recognition. And then something else. A plea. Silent. Fragile. Then the moment was gone. The moment should have passed like any other on safety day. Kids pointing. Phones. Clicking. Dogs posing. But the air shifted the second Ivy Harper's wheelchair crossed into Valor's line of sight. He didn't move at first. He didn't have to. Because stillness drew stillnesses louder than any bark. Maya felt it before she saw it. The leash in her hand went rigid, like a cable drawn tight over a cliff's edge. Valor's head snapped toward the girl, his body tensing into a posture Maya hadn't seen since the hostage rescue 6 months ago. Ears locked forward, jaw clenched, pupils dilated. She whispered his name. Valor. But he was no longer listening to her. He was locked in. And then came the growl. Low, guttural, ancestral. The kind of sound that bypassed language and tapped straight into the human spine. A few children instinctively backed away. One teacher gasped. Maya tightened her grip. Then he lunged. A violent jolt surged through the leash as Valor launched toward Ivy. His bark exploded into the air sharp, relentless, urgent, not playful, not confused. It was the kind of bark Maya had only ever heard twice in her career. The first time, it led them to a woman buried beneath 6 feet of rubble. The second, to a van rigged to detonate. Today, it was directed at a little girl in a wheelchair. "I said heel!" Maya commanded, bracing her boots against the pavement, using every ounce of strength to restrain him. Valor skidded against the concrete, claws scraping, hackles raised like jagged lines along his spine. He wasn't just reacting, he was alerting, desperate to move forward. His entire body trembled with the tension of withheld instinct. Children screamed. Teachers moved in. Glinda staggered backward, gripping the wheelchair handles as if Maya might lose control at any second. "What is wrong with that animal?" Glinda barked, shielding Ivy behind her body. Maya pulled Valor down into a forced sit. He's never done this before," she said through gritted teeth, sweat prickling at the back of her neck. "He must hate wheelchairs," Glinda said sharply, her perfume now cutting through the chaos like acid. "I told the school this might happen. Some dogs don't react well." But Maya wasn't listening anymore. She was looking at the girl. Ivy hadn't flinched. Not once. Her hands stayed folded in her lap. Her face was calm. Almost too calm, like someone holding their breath underwater. And in her eyes, dark and glassy beneath her bangs, Maya saw something she couldn't name yet. It wasn't fear. It wasn't confusion. It was familiarity. Like she recognized this kind of chaos. Like she had lived inside it. And God help her, it looked like relief. For a second, just a flicker, Ivy looked straight at Valor, and her lips parted as if to speak. But Glinda quickly spun the chair around. "Come on, sweetheart," she said with a rehearsed tightness. "We've had enough excitement for one day." She pushed the wheelchair quickly across the pavement, past the booths, and back toward the school. A teacher offered to escort them inside, but Glinda declined. "She's fine. We're fine." Valor twisted his body again, trying to follow. His tail was stiff as rebar. His gaze never left the girl's silhouette, now growing smaller in the distance. "Valor, stay," Maya whispered, kneeling beside him, one hand on his collar, the other on his chest. She felt the deep tremble in his muscles. This wasn't adrenaline. This wasn't confusion. This was insistence. Whatever he'd sensed it hadn't left him. Behind them, the field was dead quiet. The other K-9 officers stared, unsure whether to speak. Children whispered nervously. Maya forced herself to stand, brushing grit from her pants, trying to smile at the parents who avoided her gaze. "She's probably right," one officer offered quietly. "Could have been the wheels. Dogs get spooked." Maya shook her head. "Not him. He's only a dog." "No," she said. "He's not." And deep down, she already knew. Dogs don't lee. The rain began just after midnight. Not the soft, rhythmic kind that lulled the city to sleep, but the heavy, deliberate downpour that struck the window panes like a warning. Thunder growled low over the Cedar Falls skyline, distant but approaching. From her fifth-floor apartment, Lieutenant Maya Torres stared out into the dark, her coffee untouched and growing cold in her hand. Valor paced behind her. He never paced. The steady click, click, click of his claws against the hardwood floor was a foreign sound in this apartmenta, sound that didn't belong to bedtime routines or quiet nights. Every few seconds, he'd stop, stare at the door, then resume like something was pressing at the edge of his instincts just out of reach. Maya rubbed her temples. She hadn't changed out of uniform. Her utility belt sat half unclipped on the counter, radio off, badge still pinned to her chest. She was tired, God. She was tired, but no part of her body would yield to rest. Not after what happened today. She'd seen Valor bark before, charge before, raise hell in the middle of a standoff. But that what happened in front of the school, that wasn't Valor going off. That was Valor alerting. The kind of bark that wasn't learned it was born. A bark that had saved lives. And today, it had been aimed at a child. She turned from the window and dropped into the worn chair beside her laptop. The screen glowed in the dim light, waiting for a search query she hadn't typed yet. Maya hesitated, her fingers hovering above the keyboard, guilt crawling under her skin. This wasn't procedure. There was no open case. There were no charges, no reports, just a gut feeling and a dog's bark. But that bark had never been wrong before. She exhaled, cracked her knuckles, and began typing, "Ivy Harper, Cedar Falls, medical records per G guardianship status." It was a long shot, but sometimes the smallest inconsistencies were the ones that whispered the loudest. The first hit came from the school's public newsletter. "Welcome to our new student, Ivy Harper." A smiling photo of Glinda waving from behind Ivy's wheelchair, one hand raised awkwardly like she hadn't expected the shot to be taken. Ivy's smile was strained, uncertain. Her hands gripped the armrests as if they anchored her to the earth. No father listed. No mention of a mother. She narrowed the search. Hospital database. Emergency room records. Physical therapy facilities. For a child in a wheelchair, there should have been a paper trail of diagnosis. A discharge. Something. Nothing. Not in the last 12 months. Not under Harper, at least. She tried variations. Expanded the search to include surrounding counties. Still nothing. Thunder cracked louder now, close enough to rattle the windows. Valor moved to the door and sat, ears pinned back, chest rising and falling with slow, deep breaths, watching, waiting, like he expected someone to knock. "Hey," Maya whispered, standing slowly and walking toward him. She crouched, brushing her hand gently over his shoulders. "What is it, boy? What are you feeling?" Valor didn't move. He just stared. At the door. At the dark. At something Maya couldn't see. A chill crawled up her spine. She rose, locked the deadbolt, and double-checked the windows. Then she went back to her laptop and typed in a name she didn't want to type. Glenda Morell, Cedar Falls, alias history, background check. The first few results were nothing. PTA volunteer, temporary in-home caretaker license, a social media account with smiley faces and cherry pie photos. Then came a flagged article from another state, River Creek, Nevada. 3 years ago, a missing child alert, a fire at a women's shelter, a woman listed as a volunteer, Glenda M. Roswell, 53. Some eyes, some Ismail, different name. Maya's heart thudded once hard, like her body wanted to resist what her brain was starting to believe. She clicked the photo and zoomed in. The hair was shorter. She wore glasses then, but it was her. She pulled up a public court record tied to the shelter fire. A single line at the bottom of the report made her stomach twist. 1 adult female missing, 1 child unaccounted for. She leaned back slowly, her pulse loud in her ears. It didn't make sense, but it also made too much sense. Valor didn't react to wheelchairs. He reacted to patterns, smells, chemical shifts in the body that humans didn't notice. He'd once detected a man having a seizure before the man even knew it was happening. Today, he had stared at Ivy not as prey, not as threat, but as if he recognized her distress, buried under layers of silence. That bark wasn't meant to scare. It was meant to signal. Maya closed the laptop and looked at Valor. He had moved again this time, lying near the balcony door, chin on his paws but eyes wide open. She knelt beside him. "You never cry wolf," she whispered. His tail thumped Onslow. Then still again. Lightning flashed across the window, casting the whole room in white for a single second. And for just that moment, Maya saw their reflections side by side her, with worry hollowing out her eyes, and Valor with a look she couldn't unsee. He knew something, and she was finally ready to follow his lead. The morning air outside Maple Grove Elementary was still thick with mist, the kind that clung to window panes and blurred outlines into watercolor. But inside Maya Torres, everything felt sharpened, too sharp. She parked the cruiser 2 blocks away, deliberately out of view. She wasn't on duty this time. No uniform, no badge, just jeans, a gray hoodie, and a nylon K9 vest for Valor, unmarked and clean. She tightened the strap around his chest, whispered, "We're not here to cause a scene, okay?" and opened the back door. Valor jumped out with quiet purpose. No tail wag, no usual morning trot. His body was tense, alert but not aggressive. Whatever had started yesterday hadn't left him overnight. He was carrying it still, like a stone under his ribs. They approached the front office casually. Maya wore her best polite confusion as she pushed open the door. "Hey, sorry to drop in," she said with a sheepish grin to the receptionist. "I think I might have left one of my training clickers here after the demo yesterday. Figured it's worth checking before we order a new one. They're not cheap." "And one." The woman behind the desk blinked, nodded slowly, and smiled. "Oh, sure, Lieutenant. You're welcome to look around. Lost and found is by the janitor's closet, but I think Mr. Lewis already checked and didn't see anything." "No worries," Maya replied, already making her way toward the hallway. Valor walked beside her, unhurried but steady, nose working the air like a whisper in motion. The moment they crossed the threshold from polished tile to the linoleum of the main hallway, Valor slowed. His ears twitched forward. His gait shiftless of a patrol, more of a search. Maya let the leash go slack, staying just behind him. She kept her eyes on the corkboards, the kid-made safety posters still taped unevenly across the walls. Everything looked normal, too normal. But dogs never reacted to what things looked like. They reacted to what things were. When they reached the intersection near the gym doors, the exact spot where Ivy Harper's wheelchair had passed by, Valor stopped, then sat. He didn't look at Maya. He didn't bark. He just lowered his head, pressed his nose to the floor, and let out a long, low whine. Maya's heart skipped. That sound it was part of his trained vocabulary. A signal. A distress marker. Not fear, not aggression, just one message. Something here isn't right. "Good boy," Maya whispered, crouching beside him. "You remember." She touched the ground where his nose had landed. Nothing visible. But that didn't matter. What Valor was picking up wouldn't be in plain sight. He rose, turned left down the corridor, then paused again at a door labeled Custodial Access. He sniffed the base, circled once, then sat again. Maya looked around. The hallway was still empty. Teachers were likely in morning prep, and kids weren't due for another 20 minutes. She reached out, testing the knob. Locked. Of course. But through the thin slit in the doorframe, she caught the faintest whiff bleach and mold. Odd mix. Not fresh like a recent mopping. Older. Stale. Valor whined again. Maya pulled out her phone, snapped a photo of the door, then stepped back. She didn't have a warrant, and she wasn't ready to make this official. Not yet. Not without more. But Valor had just confirmed what her gut had been screaming since last night. She walked him slowly back toward the entrance, retracing the steps Ivy's wheelchair had taken. He paused again at a second point, by the fire exit near the nurse's station. Saturday. Whined. That was 2 alerts within 100 feet. She turned to him. Tell me what's wrong, buddy. He looked up at Harriez, sharp, body still. Then, without cue, he placed his paw gently on her boot. A third signal. Maya swallowed hard. 3 indicators. All near the same hallway, all tied to one child. This wasn't coincidence. As they exited the building, she thanked the receptionist again, still wearing that practiced smile. No clicker, she said with a sigh. Probably rolled under a car or something. But her hands were trembling slightly as she adjusted Valor's vest. Back in the cruiser, she didn't start the engine right away. She just sat there, Valor curled behind her seat, and stared out at the elementary school like it had turned into something else entirely. This was supposed to be a building filled with laughter, colors, spelling tests, and story time. Now it felt like it had a shadow sitting on top of it. Quiet, heavy, patient. She tapped her fingers against the steering wheel. Glenda. Ivy. The locked door. The wiped medical records. The different aliases. Something was hiding here, and Valor had just pointed straight at it. All right, she whispered, eyes narrowing. Let's see what else they've buried. The cafe was quiet that morning. A sleepy Wednesday haze clung to the windows, dimming the world in a shade of gray that matched Maya's mood. She sat near the back booth, Valor lying under the table, his eyes alert even in rest. He didn't do well in tight indoor spaces when Maya was uneasy and this week had turned something in her gut to stone. At 9:04 a.m., Paige Reynolds walked in, clutching a green folder like it might fly away if she loosened her grip. Maya stood, offered a hand. Paige took it soft but cold and slid into the booth across from her. Thanks for meeting me, Maya said, keeping her voice calm. Paige offered a tired smile. Honestly, I'm relieved you asked. She looked around before leaning forward, lowering her voice. It's about Ivy, isn't it? Maya nodded. I need to understand what I'm seeing, or rather what Valor's seeing. Paige hesitated, then opened the folder. Inside was a crude drawing-colored pencil on construction paper, the kind most kids draw. But this one stopped Maya cold. A girl stood in the middle stick-thin legs, hair scribbled in brown. Behind her, a taller woman loomed, all jagged lines and a face scribbled entirely in red crayon. The eyes were black dots, the mouth a slash. No hands, just black streaks where fingers should be. But what pulled Maya's chest tight was the figure off to the side a creature. Not human, not dog. Its body twisted like it was being dragged away, a red rope around its neck. One eye was missing. The other stared back. She drew this last week during art time, Paige said softly. I keep all the drawings the kids make, especially when they carry weight. Maya looked up. Has she said anything? About home? Paige sighed, ran a hand through her curls. Not directly. Ivy's extremely reserved, doesn't initiate, rarely makes eye contact unless she's asked about books or animals. But her worker stories, her art, it's always centered on captivity. Something trying to get out. Maya tapped the drawing. Do you recognize this woman? I think it's Glenda, her aunt. Ivy doesn't call her by name. Only ever she or ma'am. Never aunt, never family. That alone, well, it raises things. Paige pulled a post-it from the folder. There's more. She passed it to Maya. A scribbled note in careful handwriting. She tells me to smile in public. Smiling is lying. Maya felt her throat dry out. Paige continued, her voice low now. A few weeks ago, Ivy came to school with a bruise. Upper arm, right side. I noticed it when helping her with her jacket. When I asked, she flinched. Told me she fell down the ramp. Did you report it? I filled out a concern form. But it didn't go far. No clear witness, no confession. And Glinda was very firm in saying Ivy bruises easily. We're told not to escalate unless there's clear and present danger. Paige shook her head bitterly. It's a system built on aftermath, not prevention. Damn. Maya leaned back, heart racing. What did Valor pick up yesterday, do you think? Ivy was visibly tense even before she rolled past him, Paige said. I think her body gave off something fear. Cortisol. Maybe something he picked up on that humans can't. She looked at Valor under the table, then back to Maya. Dogs know things before we do. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. But something in her said, I'm not safe. And he heard it. Maya nodded, gripping the edge of the folder. She's smart, Paige added. Too smart for her age. And whatever's happening, she knows not to speak it out loud. But children always find other ways. Maya studied the drawing. Again, the red-faced woman. The creature being pulled. She's telling us, Maya said. We just have to learn how to listen. Paige hesitated before saying, There's something else. She pulled out a form from the back of the folder. Her file was transferred here from Arkansas, but the records are sparse. No emergency contacts beyond Glinda, no documented pediatrician, and no medical history past age 5. Nothing about the accident that supposedly caused the paralysis. Maya's brows furrowed. You're saying she may not even be? Paige nodded slowly. I'm saying the story is full of holes, and Ivy doesn't talk about any of it. Outside, the morning had brightened slightly, but inside Maya felt the storm return. Do I have your permission to make a formal welfare inquiry? Maya asked gently. Paige took a breath. As a counselor, I'm bound by rules, but as a human being? She slid the folder across the table. Whatever you need, Lieutenant. Just get her out if something's wrong. Maya tucked the folder into her coat and nodded once. Firmly. Don't worry, she said. We don't walk away from kids like Ivy. Valor shifted beneath the table, quiet but awake. Watching. Waiting. The war had just begun. The door had barely clicked shut behind her when Valor began to pace. Back and forth. Tail low, ears twitching. Paws landing soundlessly on the hardwood. Like a shadow chasing the scent of something just out of reach. Maya hung her coat and placed the school counselor's folder on the dining table. The air in the apartment was still, but there was a current in it, charged, unsettled. Valor's nails clicked against the floor as he rounded again. Easy, she whispered, kneeling beside him. Her hand brushed his shoulder, but his body remained taut, muscles tight as coiled wire. His eyes locked on hers, dark, alert, full of something she couldn't name. He gave a low, guttural whine. It wasn't pain. It wasn't fear. It was knowing. Maya stood slowly, rubbing her forehead. Her own pulse was threading faster. Something wasn't right. Still wasn't right. This wasn't just about a drawing or an odd bruise. Valor never behaved like this after an incident. Unless the danger hadn't passed. She grabbed her laptop, opened it on the table, and pulled the folder closer. Ivy's intake file sat on top. A single-page summary. One printed form. No hospital logo. No physician signature. The section labeled Paralysis Origin read, Accidental fall from playset, age 6, diagnosed by family practitioner. New details. New date. New clinic. She opened a new browser tab and typed, Glinda, T, Ashcroft, Arkansas, Guardian record. Nothing. She added, Maple Grove. Still nothing. After 20 minutes and a dozen dead-end links, she paused. The name Glinda didn't feel real. It felt chosen. Maya leaned back in her chair and narrowed her eyes. Okay, she whispered to herself. Let's see who you were before. She entered the name into a national public records database with a Twistalius search enabled. 1 hit, then 3, then 7. Glinda T. Ashcroft had also been Glinda Rains, Gloria Trask, and Shelley Kinayach, name appearing briefly, attached to P.O. Boxes in short-term leases across 3 states. Arkansas, Missouri, North Dakota. But one flagged entry made Maya's fingers still. Potential match, Guardian under review, River Creek, Kansas. She clicked. It was a newspaper clipping from 5 years ago. No image, just a paragraph. Authorities are still searching for 3-year-old Hope Lindell, last seen in the care of her maternal aunt. The aunt, formerly known as Shelley Kinney, failed to return Hope after a scheduled guardianship weekend. Custody had been under dispute. No charges filed as of publication. Maya's stomach dropped. Hope, age 3, gone. She sat very still, heart pounding, gaze fixed on the name, Shelley Kinney. She opened Ivy's file again, looked at the enrollment form, Glenda's signature fluid, practiced. But something about the G in Glenda and the K in Kinney, it matched. Not just the handwriting, but the flare and unconscious stroke that even a skilled liar wouldn't think to change. Valor let out a sharp bark. Loud. Sudden. Maya jumped, spinning in her chair. He was at the window now, front paws on the sill, peering out into the night like he expected someone to be watching back. His tail was stiff, hackles up. Maya crossed to him. Her hand rested lightly on his back. His skin flinched beneath her palm. She turned her gaze to the dark outside. Street empty. Nothing but wind tugging at the branches and the low grumble of distant traffic. But she felt it too. That itch between the shoulder blades, like being observed by something just beyond the veil of sight. "Okay," she said aloud, voice low but steady. "Let's follow it through." She returned to the table, typed Hope Lindell missing into a deeper database reserved for law enforcement tone she still had partial access to, thanks to her K-9 unit credentials. One active file. No closure. Ivy Lindell. The ages lined up. Time since disappearance. 5 years. Ivy's current age. 8. Same child? Same eyes? Maya opened her phone and pulled up the Maple Grove Elementary Facebook page. She scrolled until she found a recent post from Safety Day. Kids lined up in front of fire trucks. Ivy was near the end of the row. Face turned slightly. Eyes sharp. Reserved. She opened a second tab with the missing child bulletin. No photo, just a stock silhouette and height estimate. But Maya's gut didn't need pictures. Her gut had Valor. She looked at him now. He'd stopped pacing, sitting by the window. Still. Watching. He knew. Something about Ivy was buried in plain sight. Something no one had bothered to dig for because it didn't cry or bleed or scream. Because it wheeled itself into rooms and smiled on command. Because the person pulling the strings had learned how to hide in the seams of the system. Maya stared at the open folder again, her breath shallow. She whispered, mostly to herself but also to the dog who never left her side. "We're not chasing shadows anymore, are we?" Valor turned from the window, ears up, eyes fixed on her. He gave one sharp bark. Number. They were chasing a name that wasn't real. And a story that was never true. The request was simple on paper. Just another visit from Officer Maya with her beloved K-9 partner Valoran. Educational session on safety around service dogs. Maple Grove Elementary had hosted events like it before. The staff said yes with a quick smile and a nod. No one questioned her motive. But as Maya clipped Valor's badge onto his vest that morning, her heart beat with a slow, steady weight. This wasn't just a lesson. This was a recon mission in daylight, wrapped in treats and wagging tails. As she walked through the front entrance, students waved, and teachers greeted her warmly. Valor trotted beside her, proud and poised, his harness clean, his steps alert. On the surface, they were a team of calm efficiency. But inside, Maya's instincts were sharp, as a wire pulled taut. Paige Reynolds, the counselor, met her outside the classroom with a practiced smile, but there was something wary behind her eyes. "Appreciate you doing this again," Paige said under her breath. Glenda was a little hesitant about the distraction, but Principal Adler insisted it'd be good PR. "Just keep it light," Maya nodded. "Light is what we do best." They pushed open the classroom door to a chorus of gasps and claps. Children lit up at the sight of Valor, whispering and fidgeting with excitement as the big German shepherd padded in. Even Glenda forced a thin smile from her spot at the back of the room. But Maya wasn't looking at Glenda. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Ivith girl in the chair. Today, Ivy wore a soft purple hoodie, her hair braided neatly down her back. Her face showed no emotion at first, but when she saw Valor, something flickered. Not fear, not joy. Something closer to recognition. It lasted less than a second before her eyes dropped to her lap and her hands tucked neatly together. Maya caught the moment, stored it like a photograph. She knelt beside Valor and gave a signal. He sat, then offered a paw to the room. A few kids giggled. Another signal, and he bowed dramatically. A third, and he rolled onto his side with a soft woof. Laughter broke out. Maya smiled and rose, letting the familiar script begin. "Who remembers what we do when we see a service dog in public?" she asked. "Don't pet without asking," a boy blurted. "Right," Maya said warmly. "Service dogs are working, even if they look adorable." She winked, pacing slowly between the desks. "Now Valor here. He's been trained in scent detection, search and rescue, and tap, tap, tap." The rhythm was soft, barely audible, but she caught it. Ivy was tapping her fingers against the side of her chair, eyes fixed not on Maya, but on Valor. Not blinking, not moving, just tapping, steady and mechanical, like muscle memory firing on its own. Maya continued speaking, but her peripheral vision stayed locked. She shifted, sending Valor around the desks. The dog looped past a few children, sniffing gently at backpacks and sneakers, ever the professional. Then he approached Ivy and stopped. No bark, no growl, just a pause, a tilt of the head, ears forward. Ivy didn't move, but Maya saw her foot twitch, the left one, almost imperceptibly beneath the blanket draped over her lap. No one else noticed, but Maya did. Valor did. Her chest tightened. Still, she smiled through it. Who wants to try giving Valor a command? Hands shot up. Maya nodded to a boy in the front. "Say sit. Nice and clear." "Sit." Valor obeyed with military precision. Applause. The show went on 10 more minutes of questions, Valor's tricks, and the safety checklist. Maya handed out sticker badges, paper paw prints, and a take-home flyer with a cartoon of Valor on the front. But her thoughts were no longer on the lesson. She was tracking patterns. When Ivy clapped, her palms barely touched. Her eyes shifted quickly each time someone called on her. She said little, only nodding when a student beside her leaned in to whisper something. Maya ended the session with a cheerful goodbye and one last high five from Valor. "Thank you, Officer Maya," the class chanted. She turned to the teacher. "Mind if I let Valor stretch his legs a bit in the hallway?" "Of course," the woman replied, too busy gathering crayon-covered worksheets to notice anything else. Maya led Valor into the empty corridor. She waited until the door clicked behind her, then exhaled. Hard. She crouched beside her dog and looked into his eyes. "You saw it, didn't you?" Valor licked her hand once, then sat, facing the door they'd just exited. He didn't wag. He didn't relax. Instead, he waited, like he knew they'd be coming back, and they would. Because something in that room didn't add up. Because a child's feet don't twitch if they can't feel them. Because Valor didn't lie. And because a girl named Ivy might be carrying a secret she wasn't allowed to speak out loud. The hallways were quieter than usual as Maya clipped Valor's leash back onto his harness. The visit had gone off smoothly, too smoothly. But Valor was still keyed in, nose occasionally twitching, ears rotating to catch sounds beyond human reach. The students had returned to their reading blocks. The door to Ivy's classroom was ajar. Maya stole one last glance inside. Ivy sat still in her wheelchair near the window, her body angled toward the sun. A picture-perfect silhouette of calm. But something in that stillness didn't sit right. Maya stepped back, but Valor didn't move. Instead, he turned, walked, and sat right beside Ivy again, just outside the open door. There was a tension in the air. Not danger, something smaller, quieter, like the sound of a breath being held too long. Maya watched as Ivy reached a slow, uncertain hand toward Valor's collar. She hesitated midair, as though battling with herself. Then, in one swift motion smooth but unmistakable, she tucked something under his vest strap. Valor didn't react, just let her do it. Maya said nothing. Her heart rate kicked. She waited until Ivy's hand returned to her lap, until the girl's eyes dropped, and until Glenda reappeared beside her with that ever-watchful glance. Maya gave a practiced nod and a final wave. "Thanks again," she called lightly. "We'll be out of your way." Glenda said nothing, only offered a tight smile. They exited into the warm noon sun. The walk to the cruiser felt longer than usual. Maya's boots echoed against the sidewalk, and Valor's gait was slower, more controlled. As soon as they reached the passenger side, she gave the command, "Load." Valor jumped up, settled, and turned his head to her before she even shut the door. Something was tucked beneath his collar, just behind the ID tag. Maya reached in, slowly, carefully. Her fingers brushed paper, crumpled. Her throat tightened. She unfolded it right there on the sidewalk, shielding it from the breeze. 2 words, written in uneven pencil strokes, the kind that comes from trembling fingers and a desperate whisper too afraid to be spoken out loud. Help me. She lies. A chill broke down Maya's spine. Her first thought wasn't who. It was, how long? How long had Ivy been trying to find a way out? How many other people had missed this? How many times had her body told the truth while her lips stayed sealed? And how many lies had Glenda sculpted into care while the truth rotted behind closed doors? Maya folded the note with surgical care, like handling a fragile piece of evidence, which, in truth, it was. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. This was a cry for help. From a child too scared to say it out loud, to a dog who didn't need words to understand. She looked at Valor through the glass. His eyes were locked on her. Steady, focused. I know, she whispered. Maya climbed into the driver's seat and drove with one hand, the other still clutching the note. She didn't turn on music. She didn't speak. She didn't even check her phone. Her thoughts moved faster than the wheels on the road. This changed everything. She'd been dancing around theory, maybe abuse, maybe fraud, maybe some buried trauma Glenda hadn't wanted to report. But this was active, present, ongoing. She pulled into her apartment parking lot and sat in the car for a moment before taking a photo of the note with her secure device. Then she carefully slipped it into the evidence envelope she kept in her glove compartment. Not official yet, but getting there. Inside the apartment, Valor stayed close. Not anxious, just present. He followed her from the entry to the kitchen, watching her movements with the quiet loyalty Maya had come to lean on more than she liked to admit. As she sat at the dining table, she placed the note beside her laptop. The pencil strokes echoed louder now in the silence of home. She thought about Ivy's face. Expressionless, guarded, that little twitch of her foot, so carefully hidden under the blanket, that momentary flicker of something like fear or knowing. Maya reached for her files, the ones she'd started building ever since that first bark in the hallway. Now, the game had changed. This wasn't about a strange reaction anymore. It was about a girl who knew she was being watched, who understood that dogs, unlike people, couldn't be manipulated with words. That night, as thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, Maya sat in her living room, laptop open, Valor curled at her feet. She reopened her search into Glenda's alias trail, digging deeper this time into social media archives, medical registries, patient complaint databases. She wasn't just chasing ghosts now. She had a witness, a silent one, but one who had found the only voice she could trust, a German shepherd who didn't need to speak to deliver the truth. And that truth had finally found its way into Maya's hands. The trailer sat crooked at the edge of a gravel lot, tucked behind a row of cypress trees like it was hiding from the world. Rust lined the seams of the aluminum siding. The curtains were drawn, even though it was mid-afternoon. Maya cut the engine and sat in silence for a beat. Valor, from the passenger seat, stared forward tense, but still. She could feel it in her chest. This wasn't going to be a conversation. This was going to be a line crossed. Maya clipped her badge to her belt and opened the door. Gravel crunched underfoot as she approached. Valor moved beside her like a shadow, alert but not aggressive, as if he, too, understood they were stepping onto something fragile, or dangerous, or both. She raised her hand and knocked. No answer. A flicker of movement behind the curtain-thin stillness. She knocked again, firmer. Glenda Martin? It's Officer Maya Vance. I'd like to speak with you. Another beat of silence. Then the sound of a lock being drawn. The door creaked open just a few inches. Glenda's eyes peered through the gap, her mouth pursed tight. Is this about the school again? She asked, voice sharp. I need to follow up on a welfare concern, Maya replied evenly. Just a few questions. You people always think you know better, Glenda muttered, stepping into the doorway but making no move to let Maya in. She's fine. I already told the school counselor. Valor growled, low, controlled. From deep in his chest, Glinda's posture stiffened. Maya kept her voice calm. "Ma'am, can I please come inside? Number she's resting." A loud crash echoed from somewhere deeper in the trailer. Sharp, metallic-like, something heavy had been knocked over. Maya's hand moved instinctively to her radio. "What was that?" she asked. "Just the cat," Glenda said too quickly. Valor moved forward. He didn't bark. He didn't pull. He just planted himself directly in front of the door and stared. Maya had seen him do that before. Once in a basement with a frightened woman and a man holding a gun behind a laundry machine. Once when a child was locked in a closet during a domestic dispute. It was his signal. Someone inside is not okay. "I'm entering," Maya said, stepping forward. "You can't," Glenda shouted, trying to block the doorway. Maya didn't flinch. She held up the welfare report she'd filed that morning, a hard copy, stamped, signed, and now legally binding. "I can. Under Section 7C2 of the Child Protective Code, I have probable cause and a documented welfare concern. Step aside." Glenda hesitated. Then, in a move that felt more like retreat than consent, she backed into the trailer. Maya entered. The air smelled stale, something acidic underneath. The blinds were drawn, casting everything in a sickly dim glow. "Ivy?" she called. No answer. Valor led the way, his pace slow, deliberate. They moved past a kitchen with chipped countertops, past a narrow hallway lined with stacked boxes and piles of laundry. And then, at the far end of the hallway, Ivy, sitting at the edge of a small bed. Her wheelchair was beside her, untouched. She wasn't strapped in. Her legs bare, thin hung off the side. Maya froze. Ivy's eyes met hers, for a fraction of a second, then dropped again. She looked pale, not just in skin, but in presence, like someone had slowly erased the color from her. Maya's voice softened. "Hey, Ivy." No response. Behind her, Glenda said tightly, "She's fine. She just gets dizzy sometimes." Maya turned. Her tone changed. "Where's her medication?" Glenda blinked. "Excuse me? You said she's dizzy. I'm asking what medication she's on. And where it is." Glenda opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "There's a prescription in the cabinet." "For what condition?" It's for nerve pain. Chronic." "Which doctor prescribed it?" "I." Maya didn't wait for an answer. She raised her radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Vance. I need immediate medical response to 1726 County Road 12. Lot B minor female appears lethargic, potentially malnourished. Please advise EMS. Possible child endangerment." Glenda stepped forward, rage overtaking panic. "You're overreacting. This is harassment." Valor moved between them, solid, still. His stance alone froze her in place. "You've got no idea what she's been through." Glenda barked, desperate now. Maya looked her dead in the eye. "No, Glenda, but I'm starting to get a picture. And it's not you caring for a child. It's you keeping her hidden." Glenda's breath hitched. In the silence that followed, Maya crouched beside Ivy, careful not to move too quickly. "Sweetheart," she said gently. "Help is coming, okay? You're safe now." Ivy didn't answer, but her fingers, small, cold, tugged softly at the hem of Maya's sleeve. Maya reached up and squeezed them. Not too tight. Just enough to say, "I'm here. I heard you, and I believe you." Outside, the sound of sirens began to rise distant, but approaching. Inside, a lie was starting to collapse. And in the center of it all, a little girl sat at the edge of her own story, finally no longer invisible. The sterile hallway hummed with fluorescent lights. Maya sat in a hard plastic chair outside Pediatric Exam Room 3. Valor curled at her feet like a silent sentinel. His eyes stayed fixed on the closed door, ears twitching every time footsteps passed. Inside that room, a truth was unfolding. One Maya had suspected but had hoped, begged, to be wrong about. The door opened. Dr. Langston stepped out, clipboard in hand, his expression unreadable. Maya stood. "Is she okay?" The doctor hesitated. "Stable for now. But we found something unusual in her blood work." Maya's stomach dropped. Go on, she said. He lowered his voice. She has elevated levels of lidocaine. Very elevated. Toxic, in fact. Enough to cause temporary paralysis if administered routinely. Maya blinked. You're saying she wasn't born paralyzed? Not unless there's an underlying disorder we haven't seen. But there are no spinal lesions. No neurological markers. The labs indicate exposure over time-repeated, controlled dosing. That's not accidental. Maya exhaled sharply, as if the air had betrayed her. She was chemically paralyzed. Dr. Langston nodded grimly. And someone knew exactly how much to give without killing her. The room tilted for a second. Maya reached down, grounding herself on Valor's neck. His fur, always warm, always steady. Who would even think to do something like that to a child? She whispered. The question hung in the corridor, heavy and bitter. Glenda's face surfaced in her mind-tight lips. Deflection, control, that drawing, the scribbled red face, the dragging. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a map. Dr. Langston continued. We've admitted Ivy overnight. She's sleeping now. We're beginning the detox protocol slowly, but there may be psychological trauma, too. I know, Maya said softly. She's been silent for so long. She asked for you. Maya blinked. She did? The doctor gave a faint smile. Not with words. But when we tried to take Valor out of the room, she gripped his fur and wouldn't let go. Maya stepped forward, hand hovering over the door handle. May I? Dr. Langston nodded. Just a minute. Let her know she's not alone. Maya interred quietly. The room was dim. Machines beeped low and slow. Ivy lay curled under a thin blanket, eyes half-lidded, too tired to cry. Valor padded to her bedside without prompting and rested his head near her arm. Maya crouched beside her. Hey, she said gently. You're safe now. They can't hurt you anymore. Ivy didn't speak, but her hand moved trembling, delivered and slid toward Valor's paw. Fingers grazed fur, held it. Maya felt the pressure build behind her eyes. I believe you, she whispered. And we're going to make sure everyone else does too. Outside, thunder rolled low in the distance. But inside room 3, for the first time in a long time, it was quiet. Not empty. Just quiet. The walls of the interview room at Oak Ridge County PD were the color of old, snow-faded, gray at the corners. Fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting a clinical chill across the table where Glenda sat, hands cuffed in front of her, knuckles white from gripping too tight. She stared at the mirrored wall. It didn't blink back. Across from her, Detective Lang moved slowly, deliberately, placing a manila file folder on the table between them. His voice was calm, but razor-edged. You know why you're here, Glenda scoffed. Because your little dog has an overactive imagination. Lang didn't flinch. He flipped open the folder. Photos slid into view. Ivy in a hospital bed, the toxicology report. Bruises faint but present under professional lighting. Then, the note. The crumpled one Valor had carried out like a final act of duty. Help me. She lies. He watched her eyes catch on that last one. The flicker. A freeze. And then an ugly smile. No one questioned it, Glenda said at last, voice low, almost amused. Not once. Lang said nothing. Just let the silence stretch. You roll a child in a wheelchair into a grocery store with a little sign and sad eyes, and it's like magic. Free groceries, gift cards, checks. Pity comes cheap if you sell it well. She looked up, defiant. You think I wanted to raise her? After what her mother did? I took her in. I fed her. I gave her a story people cared about. You drugged her. I kept her safe. You chemically paralyzed a child. Her voice sharpened. She would have left, told lies, like her mother did before she vanished. Lang leaned forward, the steel of his badge catching the light. Her mother didn't vanish, he said evenly. You filed a false relocation report. Her name was Margaret Dunn, and her body was found in a quarry near River Creek 5 years ago. Ivy was there. She saw more than you thought. For the first time, Glenda looked shaken. Lang pressed in. We know about the false identities, the cycling of names. Ivy's medical records don't exist. Because you never had her diagnosed, you had her dosed. Lidocaine, just enough to weaken her, to make her fold. You learned that from your sister, didn't you? The nurse who lost her license in '08 for off-label use. Silence. Then, softly, so softly it cracked. Glenda said, "You'd be surprised how easy it is to fool people when you've got a story and a sad pair of eyes." Ugh. Lang shut the folder. "She'll testify." "She won't," Glenda snapped. "She's broken." "No," Lang said, standing. "She's waking up." He opened the door, and Maya stood just outside, watching through the glass. Valor sat by her side, alert but calm. Inside the room, Glenda sagged. The performance was over. No more pity. No more applause. Only the truth left echoing in the room. No one questions a child in a chair. But now, someone had, and the lie had finally met its end. The hospital room was too clean, too quiet. It buzzed with fluorescent stillness, the kind that made Ivy feel like her thoughts had nowhere to hide. White walls, sterile sheets, a plastic bracelet with a name she wasn't sure she believed anymore. Ivy. Just Ivy. She sat propped against the pillows, legs under a thin blanket. IV still threaded into the soft skin of her hand. Machines blinked without urgency. The kind of quiet that wasn't peace, it was waiting. Then came the knock. Soft. 3 taps. Valor entered first. Big, warm, steady. Then Maya followed behind him, carrying a small bag and that same look in her eyes, half concern, half something else Ivy couldn't name yet. Maybe hope. "Hi," Maya said gently, setting the bag on the nightstand. "We brought cookies." Valor trotted forward and rested his head on the side of the bed, nose inches from Ivy's fingers. She reached out without thinking, her fingers brushing over the fur between his eyes. He let out a low huff, like a sigh through a secret. "I've never seen him like that," Ivy whispered, eyes locked on him. "When he barked, like he knew." Maya sat beside her, voice soft. "He did." Ivy looked away, her small fingers twisted in the blanket. "Is he really my hero?" There was a pause. Maya smiled not with her mouth, but with her whole being. She reached forward, tucking a strand of hair behind Ivy's ear, the way a mother might. Not too firm, not too soft. "No," she said. "He's ours." For a beat, neither spoke. Outside the window, the sky folded into night. Rain pressed gently against the glass. Not enough to scare. Just enough to say, "You're not alone." Ivy leaned her cheek into Valor's head. "I thought I was paralyzed," she whispered. "But it wasn't me, was it? It was her." Maya nodded. "And that's over now." A flicker passed over Ivy's face, something halfway between sorrow and wonder. She looked at her legs beneath the blanket, still too afraid to try. "What if I can't?" she whispered. "You can," Maya said. "Maybe not today, maybe not all at once, but you can." That night, after Maya and Valor had left and the room had dimmed into soft monitors and sleeping nurses, Ivy lay awake. The shadows no longer looked like monsters. They looked like space she could move into. She threw the blanket back. Her right foot rested just at the edge of the mattress. Her breath caught. "Please." She closed her eyes and tried. The muscles trembled like a storm was trying to pass through bone. And then it moved, just an inch. But to Harriet felt like the world shifted. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and silent. Not from pain, not from fear, but from the fragile, astonishing truth. She was still in there. She hadn't been erased. She had been waiting. And now, step by tiny step, she was coming back. The morning after Ivy's foot moved, the hospital room felt different. There was no music, no laughter, just a hushed reverence in the way light poured through the blinds, slanting across her blanket like lines drawn by a gentler hand. Something in her had shifted. Not just her body, but something deeper, something that had been locked away, dust-covered and curled in silence. Maya sat in the chair near the window, Valor at her feet, dozing but alert in the way only a service dog could be. One ear twitched when Ivy stirred. "I remembered something," Ivy said, voice barely above a whisper. Maya turned. Ivy stared at the ceiling. Her eyes had the faraway shimmer of someone watching a reel of old film in their mind. "It was a song," she continued slowly, like she was testing each word before letting it go. "She used to hum it when the lights went out, not loud. Just for me. About stars. Falling stars, I think. A pause." Her voice was soft, She smelled like cinnamon, not the spicy kind, the warm kind, like cookies just pulled from the oven. Maya didn't interrupt. She sat still, hands clasped in her lap, heart aching in that quiet way only truth can. Ivy's fingers fidgeted with the hem of her hospital gown. Then, after a moment, she reached for the inside lining of the coat that still hung on the back of her wheelchair, the only possession she insisted on keeping nearby. "There was something in here," Ivy said, her voice nearly swallowed by the beep of the monitor. "I didn't show anyone. I don't know why." She pulled it out, a folded, worn piece of photo paper, the edges soft from being handled too many times. Maya moved gently to Ivy's bedside, sitting beside her. The photo was grainy, probably printed from an old phone, but what it captured was unmistakable. A young woman kneeling in a sunlit field, arms wrapped around a little girl who looked to be about 4. The woman's smile was full and easy, the kind of smile that couldn't be faked. And the girl, her dark curls wild, her face smudged with something sticky, was laughing. "Is that you?" Maya asked softly. Ivy nodded, tears glistening but refusing to fall. "She called me Firefly, said I lit up her world, even on the dark days. Was this your mother?" "I think so," Ivy said, voice trembling. "I think her name was Lillian." Maya gently took the photo, flipped it over. There, barely legible in blue ink, someone had scrawled, "Me and my girl, the 16th of July, Firefly season." A silence settled between them, not heavy, but sacred, like the kind you hold when something broken begins to mend. "Glenda told me I was abandoned," Ivy whispered. "Said my real mom didn't want me, that I cried too much, that I was too much." Maya's throat tightened. "That was a lie." Ivy looked up at her with wide, searching eyes. "You think she's still out there?" "I don't know," Maya said honestly. "But I think someone who loved you that much doesn't forget. Maybe she's been looking for you too." Valor rested his head on the edge of the bed, pressing close to Ivy's side. She reached down, fingers tangling in his fur. "I think I want to remember more," she said. Maya nodded. "Then we'll help you." Outside the hospital window, the first breeze of spring stirred the trees, gentle but steady, like a mother's lullaby returning on the wind. The photo sat on Maya's desk beneath the glow of her reading lamp, a beam of warm light casting shadows across the folds of its worn edges. Maya had scanned it hours ago, uploading it to the system with little hope, just instinct. One face, one chance. Now the screen pulsed with a result. Match found. 98.7% confidence. Maya sat up straighter. Her pulse quickened as the database pulled up the corresponding file. Name, Elena Frost. Status, missing, presumed deceased. Date of disappearance, the 12th of September, 2019. Last seen, River Creek Women's Shelter. Incident report, shelter fire. 2 presumed casualties, bodies unidentifiable. Case closed pending further evidence. Maya swallowed hard. The photo from the file was the same, woman smiling, kneeling in that sun-drenched field, arms wrapped around her daughter. Only now there was a name to match the warmth in her eyes. Elena. Not Glenda. Not a fabricated identity. Elena Frost. A single line near the bottom of the file turned Maya cold. Accompanied by child, Amelia Frost, age 4. Whereabouts unknown. Maya's heart clenched. Amelia. She reached for the coat, still hanging on the back of her office chair. The one Ivy had refused to part with. That hidden photo. That name written in fading ink. "Me and my girl, the 16th of July, Firefly season." Maya's voice cracked as she whispered it aloud. "You're Amelia." She stood, pacing. The room suddenly felt too small, too bright. Her mind raced to piece together the timeline. The shelter fire. 2 bodies unidentifiable. Elena presumed dead. Amelia missing. And then months later, a woman named Glenda Hale surfaces in a neighboring county with a paralyzed child she never officially adopted, collecting disability donations under vague nonprofit names. Always staying under thresholds. Always moving just enough not to trigger flags. Until now. Maya reached for the intercom. "Valor," she called softly. The German shepherd trotted in from the hallway where he'd been curled outside her door. Ears forward, eyes sharp. He sensed something had changed. Maya crouched to his level, letting her forehead rest lightly against his. "She's not Ivy," Maya whispered. "She's Amelia. She has a name, a history, a mother who loved her." Valor licked her knuckle once, quietly, a small, grounding gesture in the flood of realization. Maya turned back to her computer. She began cross-referencing local reports, social services archives, archived emergency calls. The deeper she went, the more it unraveled. Elena had filed for protective housing after escaping an abusive partner. There was a report of her refusing to give up her daughter even when offered safer options if she let the child go temporarily. Then came the fire. Then nothing. Until Ameliander, a new name, was placed in a wheelchair, made voiceless by drugs, paraded around for sympathy. Maya blinked back the heat in her eyes. This wasn't just a welfare case. This was abduction. She hit print on the file and watched as the pages slid from the tray, like confessions falling from heaven. On the last page, there was something else. A note from a nurse who'd survived the fire. The child kept asking for fireflies. Said her mommy told her stars were just fireflies that found their way home. Maya's breath caught. Firefly. She looked toward the window, where early dawn was just beginning to rise over the skyline of town. Faint stars still blinked in the sky, stubborn, refusing to fade. She glanced back at the hospital bracelet Ivy had taken off and left on Maya's desk. Ivy Hale, age 8. That name no longer belonged to her. Maya folded the printed photo gently and slipped it into an envelope. Then she wrote, in careful script, "To Amelia Frost, for when you're ready." She placed the envelope beside the coat. Valor let out a low whine, pacing once toward the door. "I know," Maya said. "She's been lied to long enough." The crackle of an old tape player echoed in the stillness of the records room. The air smelled of dust, ink, and Timian uneasy cocktail for anyone seeking truth in the aftermath of something long buried. Maya sat at the steel desk inside River Creek's Public Archives building, Valor at her feet, still and silent. Her fingers were smudged with carbon from newspaper reels and smears of old toner ink. Her eyes burned not from the dust, but from what they had uncovered. She adjusted the dial on the microfiche reader, freezing the frame on a headline dated the 14th of September, 2019. Shelter fire kills. 2. Mother and child presumed dead in overnight blaze. But Maya knew now that wasn't the truth. Not even close. She scribbled a note, circling the name listed in the article. Elena Frost, 27, presumed dead. Daughter, Amelia Frost, 4. She flipped to the accompanying image. Smoke, charred beams. A lone fireman holding a blackened child's doll by its melted arm. The official report listed 2 bodies found near the collapsed main hallway, unidentifiable, but believed to be mother and child due to proximity and size. But there was something strange. Maya zoomed in. One of the bodies had been found by the back exit, near the river. The other was never verified. She leaned forward, pulse quickening, as she scanned the handwritten note added at the bottom of the fire marshal's log. Second body found, at riverbank. Approx 60 meters downstream. Severe trauma, not consistent with smoke inhalation. Valor let out a soft, guttural growl. Maya froze. She remembered something Paige, the school counselor, had mentioned over coffee days earlier. There was a woman always hanging around the playground, looked out of place, eyes too alert. Said her name was Glenda, but wouldn't show ID. Maya began digging through the recovery reports from the week following the fire. The names of volunteers, medtechs, and civilian assistance teams were listed in faded ink. Most names had been verified. Then her pen stopped. Glenda Hale, volunteer, Shelter Recovery Assistance, the 13th of September, 2019. No employment record, no background check filed. Maya's throat tightened. It was her. Glenda had been there, in the wreckage, after the fire, when everything was chaos and no one was watching closely. She hadn't just stolen Amelia, she had orchestrated it. Maya turned to the incident map. A set of red arrows marked the path of the fire's progression. Most survivors were found in the east wing, near the kitchen. Elena's body had been recovered at the west, exit farther from the others, closer to the back door, closer to the river. But Maya saw what others had missed. There was no logical reason for Elena to be that far out of the shelter, with no burn marks on the floor between her and the fire's origin point. Someone had moved her. Or worse, someone had placed her there. "Valor," Maya whispered. "I think Elena was trying to escape. With Amelia." And Valor's ears perked, the muscles in his shoulders rippling like he was remembering something too. Maya flipped open a photo log taken after the fire, frame by frame. First responders, soot-covered blankets, people crying in the street. And then there, a blurry woman with a red scarf, holding a blanket. Not on any list, not listed among the official volunteers. The photo's timestamp read 3:42 a.m., but the fire had been declared out by 3:15 a.m. So what was she doing there? Why was she holding a blanket? And why, as Maya zoomed in, did the figure appear to be walking away from the shelter toward a parked car? Another click. A second frame. She wasn't alone. There was something in her arms. Something small. Maya stood abruptly, the chair scraping across the tile. Her voice cracked as she breathed the words out loud. She took her during the confusion. She used the fire. And, fingers trembling, she opened a fresh case file and began writing the words no one had dared to write for 4 years. Case reclassification request. Subject: Amelia Frost. Previously presumed deceased. New classification: victim of abduction. Potential homicide witness. Primary suspect: Glenda Hale, alias. Present at fire recovery site without proper clearance. Suspected of staging medical condition for financial gain. Recommended action: reopen investigation into Elena Frost's death with suspicion of foul play. The last piece of the puzzle slotted into place with a cruel clarity. Glenda hadn't just seen an opportunity in the fire. She had created it. Whether she struck the match or simply capitalized on chaos, the result was the same. A child drugged and renamed, a mother silenced beside a river, and 4 years of carefully woven lies. Maya stared at the final page of the report as if it might change if she just looked long enough. It didn't. The black and white photo clipped to the back showed Elena Frost arms cradling an infant, face half turned to the camera, caught mid-laughter. It was the kind of moment people put on refrigerators, frame in bedrooms, hold on to when the night stretched too long. But this one was hidden for years, buried beneath reports, encrypted files, sealed court documents buried like Elena herself. Maya closed the file slowly, her hands trembling against the metal corners of the folder. The sound of the clasp clicking shut felt like a gavel dropped in a courtroom she'd never step into. "No more hiding," she whispered. The words barely escaped her lips, but Valor heard them. He lifted his head from the floor beside her, ears pricking toward her voice, his eyes dark and steady-locked with hers. And somehow, Maya felt steadier under his gaze, less afraid. As if to answer her, Valor rose. Outside, the wind stirred. Dry leaves rose from the pavement like ash from a fire that had long since burned itself out, only to return in whispers, in truths long denied. The sky above was bruised with dusk, the last light of day bleeding into memory. Somewhere in the distance, wind chimes rang soft, hesitant, like bells at a forgotten funeral. Maya reached for her jacket and the keys to the old Ford waiting in the driveway. It was time. Behind her, Rachel stood in the doorway. She had been watching, silent, holding a mug between both hands, not to drink from, but as something to hold on to, something real. "Is it her?" Rachel asked. Maya nodded once. "She's alive, but not herself yet." Rachel didn't ask how. She didn't need to. In a world where children could be erased and mothers turned into cautionary footnotes, the how didn't matter as much as the now. "She's waiting," Maya said quietly. "At St. Agnes, room 314. The nurse says she hasn't spoken yet, doesn't respond to her name, but," her voice caught, "she's drawing birds." Rachel's hand went to her mouth. She didn't cry, not then, but her eyes shimmered with the kind of ache that comes from relief raw, staggering, unbelievable relief. "I'll stay with Ivy," Rachel said. "You go." Maya hesitated. "Are you sure?" Rachel nodded, her voice breaking on the second word. "She needs her mother, the real one." Maya turned without another word. Valor followed. The drive to St. Agnes took just under 40 minutes, But time bent strangely in those spaces between past and present. Maya's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, her jaw locked. The air in the car smelled faintly of dog, fur, leather, and something else, something like old memories trying to surface. She didn't put on music. The silence held more truth. Valor sat upright in the passenger seat, alert, sensing everything: her breath, her nerves, the tremor in her wrist. His ears twitched at every stoplight, but his gaze never left her. They pulled into the hospital parking lot just as the sky dipped into full night. Sodium lights flickered overhead, buzzing like faint accusations. Maya stepped out, glanced up at the building, its blank windows, like eyes that had seen too much. At the front desk, she gave her name. The nurse, a woman in her 50s with kind hands and tired eyes, nodded. "She hasn't said a word," the nurse whispered, "but she's calm when she draws. And there's something else." Maya's breath hitched. "What?" She stops crying when she hears barking. One of the therapy dogs passed by earlier, and she followed him with her eyes for the first time. Maya swallowed. Valor let out a low rumble. Not a growl, just a sound. Recognition, perhaps. The nurse stepped aside. "She's down the hall. Room 314. Take your time." The hallway stretched like a quiet ache. Walls painted in soft pastels. Doors with worn numbers. Everything smelled of antiseptic and lavender and the heavy stillness of waiting. Maya stopped outside 314. She hesitated, then turned the handle. Inside, the room was dimly lit, the blinds drawn halfway. A small figure sat on the hospital bed, knees drawn to her chest, hands moving slowly over a piece of paper. She didn't look up. The walls around her were peppered with drawings. Birds in flight, birds perched on branches, birds with wings stretched wide. Crayon lines that carried more than just pigment, they carried memory, grief, hope. Amelia. Her hair had grown out, no longer the soft curls from the baby photos, but a darker, tangled length that reached her shoulders. Her arms were thin, her wrists fragile, but her hands, they were steady. Maya didn't speak. She stepped in softly. Valor patted beside her, his nails tapping faintly against the linoleum. At the sound, Amelia's shoulders tensed. She froze. Valor stopped, then sat. Maya knelt slowly. "Hi," she said gently. "I'm Maya. I knew your mom." No answer. "She was brave," Maya continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "She loved you more than anything. She fought for you, even when everyone else gave up." Amelia blinked. Her crayon hovered above the page, a bird's wing unfinished. "And this guy?" Maya smiled faintly, resting a hand on Valor's back. "This is Valor. He's kind of famous, I guess. But he's really just here for you." At the sound of his name, Valor tilted his head, then inched forward low, unthreatening. His body language spoke the language of children who had learned to flinch before they learned to speak. Amelia turned her head slowly. Their eyes met. And then, almost imperceptibly, her hand dropped the crayon. She reached out. Fingers trembled in the air, unsure, waiting. Valor didn't move. Then, in a motion that felt like the breaking of an old invisible chain, Amelia touched his ear. Soft. Still. The smallest smile ghosted across her lips. A flicker. A light under years of rubble. Maya exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Minutes passed. Then more. No words were spoken, but none were needed. Amelia sat cross-legged now. Valor curled beside her on the bed like he'd always belonged there. The crayon returned to her hand. She finished the wing she'd started, then drew another bird. This one carried something in its beak. A name. Amelia. Beneath it, in uneven lines, "I remember the river. I remember the bird. I remember my name." Maya pressed her fist against her chest. Her eyes burned. Outside, wind brushed the window pane. Leaves danced again like spirits freed. And somewhere deep in the earth, under trees that once bore witness to silence, a match had finally gone out. The gate creaked open, revealing a winding path shaded by tall sugar maples. Their leaves fluttered gently like confetti in the late morning breeze, casting dappled light on the pebbled walk. A worn brass sign hung from the porch. Rachel Dane, illustrator. Tea always warm. Maya stepped onto the porch, one hand resting lightly on Ivy's shoulder, the other clutching the folder with her new name Amelia Frost, printed in careful black ink. Behind them, Valor's steps were measured and calm, his eyes sweeping the space like he already knew it would be safe. The front door opened before they could knock. Rachel Dane looked nothing like the social workers Ivy had met before. She wore a sweater flecked with dried paint, her hair loose, curly, and streaked with silver. A cat with one eye peeked around her ankles, and another a portly ginger snored loudly on a sun-warmed windowsill. Rachel smiled gently, kneeling to Ivy's height. "You must be Amelia." Ivy glanced at Maya first, who gave her a small nod. Then she whispered, "You can call me Ivy if you want. I'm still figuring it out." Rachel's eyes didn't flinch. "Then Ivy it is. We'll figure it out together." The house was small but alive. Watercolor paintings of birds and stars lined the hallway. Wind chimes tinkled from the back porch. There were soft blankets, mismatched mugs, and books on every shelf, some with teeth marks where the cats had claimed their favorites. The guest room had been prepared with care. Sunlight spilled through lace curtains onto a bed covered in a quilt stitched with tiny foxes and moons. On the desk sat a wooden easel and a tin of colored pencils, their tips newly sharpened. Rachel walked them through slowly, letting Ivy touch everything. No pressure to speak. "I work from home," she said, gently opening the closet. "You'll have your space, and Valor can stay as long as you need him. I got permission." Ivy turned, startled. "He can stay?" Maya smiled. "For the transition, yes. If that's what you want." Valor responded by resting his head on Ivy's hip, eyes tilted upward like he was asking too. Ivy dropped to her knees and buried her fingers in his fur, nodding against his shoulder. That afternoon, Maya sat with Rachel at the kitchen table, while Ivy drew in the next room quietly, but not withdrawn. The two cats had already claimed Valor as furniture. He didn't move when one perched on his back. "She's going to need time," Maya said, her voice low. "I know," Rachel replied. "Grief comes in echoes. So does trust." Maya studied her, watching how gently Rachel poured tea, how she didn't rush the silence. It was a good sign. "She's remembering more," Maya added. "Fragments, a song, her mother's perfume." Rachel nodded. "That's how stories come back. First scent, then sound, then the shape of a memory in the dark." There was something grounding about this place, Maya thought. The way the house breathed, not with forced cheer, but with quiet welcome, as if it said, "You don't have to be okay yet, just stay." When it came time to leave, Maya knelt beside Ivy at the porch steps. "You have my number, day or night," she said, "and I'll visit. Valor will let me know when." Ivy reached into her pocket, pulling out a folded scrap of paper. She hesitated, then placed it in Maya's hand. It was a drawing, a rough sketch of Valor, Maya, and Ivy, standing under star-sewn hand and paw, the other held in Maya's berry S. "I tried to remember what my mom used to draw," Ivy whispered. "She always made the stars a little too big." Maya blinked fast. "They're perfect," she said hoarsely. "Just like you." Valor nudged Maya's side softly, and she laughed through the ache in her throat. She kissed Ivy's forehead and stood. As she walked down the gravel path, she looked back. Ivy was framed in the doorway quilt over her shoulders, one hand resting on Valor's neck. She didn't wave, but her eyes held steady, no longer cast downward, no longer drugged or dulled. Inside, the orange cat knocked over a pencil jar. Ivy laughed. It was soft, like the first note of a forgotten lullaby. And in that laugh, Maya heard it. Hope. The kind that returns not with fanfare, but in the quiet decision to stay alive one more day. It was a Thursday afternoon when the air changed. The sun filtered gently through maple leaves, casting golden slats onto the sidewalk. Ivy was on the porch, curled on the wicker swing with a book too big for her lap. Rachel sat nearby, sketching lilies for a client in a soft graphite wash. One of the cats, Jupiter, snoozed belly up in a patch of sun. Valor lay stretched across the porch's edge, head between paws, his body utterly still until it wasn't. In a single breath, he went rigid. His ears pricked forward, nose lifted, muscles coiled beneath his coat like wire drawn tight. A low, guttural rumble stirred in his throat. Rachel looked up, surprised. "Valor?" He didn't answer. He didn't blink. He was staring down the street toward the bend just past the telephone pole, where the houses blurred into hedges and fences. Ivy looked too, squinting. What's he looking at? Then they saw him. A man stood on the opposite sidewalk, partially obscured behind a rusted stop sign, gray hoodie, hands in pockets, still, watching. Not the house. Watching Ivy. Rachel rose halfway from her chair. "Can I help you?" she called out, voice polite, but firm. The man didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there for a moment too long. Then he turned, walked away. Not rushed, not afraid, just calculated. Rachel's skin prickled. Valor stayed tense long after he'd vanished around the bend. Even when the street was quiet again, his growl didn't soften. He took 3 cautious steps down the porch and sniffed the wind as if trying to memorize it. That night, Ivy barely touched her dinner. Her eyes flicked toward the window often. She wrapped herself in the fox and moon quilt without being asked. And Valor? He refused to sleep. He paced between the front and back doors until well after midnight. Rachel called Maya the next morning. They pulled the footage from a neighbor's security camera across the street. Rachel and Ivy stood inside while Maya watched from her squad car laptop. Valor sat beside her, gaze locked on the screen like he understood every second. There he was, the man in the hoodie. He approached from the east, slow and casual. Then he stopped at the edge of the yard, tilted his head slightly, paused. 23 seconds. That was how long he stood there, watching Ivy on the swing. In his right hand a silver lighter. He flicked it once. Flame. Snuff. Flame. Snuff. Then he slipped it into his pocket and walked off. Maya leaned back, breath short. "You recognize him?" Rachel shook her head. "Do you think he's connected to Glenda? Possibly. Or someone she owed. Someone she ran from." Maya's voice was flat, but her jaw was tight. "She's in custody. No visitors. No calls. That doesn't mean there aren't shadows left behind." Rachel's hands trembled slightly as she reached for a mug. "Ivy doesn't need this right now. Not again. Not when she's finally sleeping through the night." "I know," Maya said. "I'll file the report. Increase patrols. Get temporary cameras installed." "What about the lighter?" Rachel asked. "You think it means something?" Maya hesitated. "Arsonists like fire the way some people like knives. It's control. A message." Rachel paled. Inside, Ivy sat at the kitchen table with a crayon in her hand, but hadn't drawn a single line. Her eyes moved toward the window again, and when Rachel came in with tea, she whispered, "Valor knew before we did." Rachel knelt. "He always will." Ivy nodded once. "I think he smelled him." That night, Valor curled tighter around Ivy's bed than usual. His head rested near her knees. One paw splayed protectively over the blanket. His eyes never closed. Not fully. And down the street, just beyond the range of the porch, light a cigarette burned quietly in the dark, flared once, and vanished. The scream wasn't loud. It was broken thin, as if clawing its way out of a throat too young to carry terror. Rachel startled awake, blanket tangled at her feet. For a second, she wasn't sure what she'd heard. Then came the second cry. "Evie!" She bolted down the hallway, nearly tripping over Valor. The shepherd had already pushed open Ivy's door with his nose, standing at her bedside, whining softly. Ivy was upright, her small body shaking, hair clinging to damp cheeks. Tears streamed silently down her face, and she clutched Valor's collar like it was the only thing anchoring her to this world. Rachel rushed in, sitting on the edge of the bed and wrapping Ivy in her arms. The girl didn't resist, just trembled, breath shuddering in half gasps. "It's okay. You're safe. I'm here. Valor's here." Ivy didn't speak for a long moment. Then, hoarse and hesitant, she whispered, "I remember the man." Rachel froze. "What man, sweetie?" "The man with the hoodie. From the porch. He's from... before." Mommy disappeared. Rachel's heart clenched. Ivy pulled back slightly, eyes wide and distant. "He used to come to the shelter. I saw him with Glenda once. I thought maybe he worked there. But then, one day, he was in our room, with Mommy. They were yelling." Rachel kept her voice steady. "What were they yelling about?" "I don't know, but Mommy was crying, and he was angry. He had this twitch." Ivy pointed to her right hand. His fingers moved like this, all the time, like he was trying to crush something that wasn't there. Valor's head tilted slightly, picking up on the shift in the girl's energy. And his smell, Ivy murmured. It was awful, like smoke and cleaning spray and something sharp. Mommy said to never talk to him. Rachel held her tighter, eyes burning. You don't have to remember everything right now. I already did, Ivy whispered. In my sleep. The next morning, Rachel called Maya. They met at the station. Maya still in uniform, eyes rimmed with concern. Ivy sat in the corner of the office, wrapped in a fleece throw, sipping cocoa. Valor lay beside her, unmoving but alert. She said the man had a hand twitch, Rachel explained. And a specific smell. He visited the shelter, might have known Glenda. Maya nodded slowly. That matches Ivy's earlier timeline before the fire. Glenda could have known him from one of the halfway programs. Or something else. She pulled up the department database. Let's start wide. Male, 30 to 50. Prior contact with River Creek shelters. Known associates with Glenda Wilkes. Twitch, or muscular tics. Arson, abuse, or drug charges. She typed silently. The hum of the station buzzed low around them. Ivy watched Valor's tail move in slow sweeps. The first 10 names meant nothing. The 11th made Maya sit straighter. Oliver Graves, 42. Prior arrests. Domestic assault. Suspected arson. Insufficient evidence. Illegal possession of tranquilizers. Violation of a restraining order. Last known residence. A condemned motel off Route 9. Former employee at a pest control company. Known to wear gloves due to chemical burns on hands. Notable detail. Right hand tremor, constant minor twitch neurological side effect from prior overdose. Maya exhaled. He's in the system. Rachel blinked. Oliver Graves. That's him? Maya turned the screen toward Ivy gently. Sweetheart, is this the man you saw? Ivy leaned forward slowly. Her cocoa sloshed. She stared at the picture grainy, a mugshot from years ago. But the face was there. The deep lines, the slouch in his shoulders, the way his eyes avoided the camera. Her voice was small. Yes, that's him. Valor growled low, not loud but with a knowing certainty. Maya looked at Rachel. If he's resurfaced, he could be watching again. If he was at the shelter the night of the fire, then he's not just a shadow, Rachel said. He's a fuse. Maya nodded grimly. And someone lit him. The meeting took place in the back room of the precinct, away from the noise of the phones and the rhythm of patrol updates. A single lamp buzzed overhead, casting long shadows across the table where Maya sat, flanked by a CPS coordinator named Elena Marsh and Lieutenant Brewer from the local police. Outside, the late afternoon was starting to turn, the kind of golden dusk that normally spilled peace across the town. But inside this room, everything was tight shoulders, jaws, silence. Maya tapped her pen against her notepad. We don't have time to wait for a full protective order. Brewer nodded. We flagged Graves, and the motel's being watched, but he hasn't returned. Whoever tipped him off about the arrest record check, he's gone to ground. Elena's voice was calm but firm. We've secured a location in Cedar Falls. Private residence, background checked. No children, no open access. It's quiet, discreet. She'll have her own room. Maya glanced down at her notes, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Ivy's eyes, the way they had widened the night before when she whispered, I remember. How soon can we move? She asked. Elena answered without hesitation. Tonight, Maya exhaled. She'll want to bring Valor. Elena smiled, soft and knowing. We already figured that. And so, Rachel was standing at the sink when Maya arrived. She had that look, one hand gripping the edge of the counter, the other absently drying a mug long after it was already dry. She knows something's wrong, Rachel said before Maya could speak. She's smart, she's scared, she should be. Maya took off her jacket, folded it over her arm, and leaned against the doorway to the living room. Ivy was curled on the couch under a blanket, her knees drawn up, Valor's chin resting across her ankles. The television was on, but the volume was loathsome cartoon flickering light that Ivy didn't seem to be watching. Maya waited until Rachel nodded, then stepped forward. Hey, kiddo. Ivy looked up. Her face was calmer than the night before, but her eyes were red, rimmed, and heavy. Hi. Maya sat beside her. Valor lifted his head slightly, but stayed in place. His weight, a constant reassurance. "I need to talk to you about something," Maya began gently. "It's about staying safe. You remember how we talked about that?" Ivy nodded. "There's a house in a place called Cedar Falls. It's quiet. It has a garden and a little reading nook with pillows. I think you'd like it." Ivy said nothing. Maya tried again. "There are people there who care. They'll help you feel more like you again. And we'll make sure no one scary can ever come near you." Ivy turned her face toward the window. "Are we going forever?" "No," Maya said. "Not forever. Just long enough to keep you safe while we figure everything out. It's like a reset, a soft place to land." There was a beat of silence, then a whisper. "Will Valor come with us?" The question held no room for negotiation. It wasn't about permission. It was about promise. Maya looked at her. No blinking, no smile. "Always." The word sat in the air like a shield. Valor gave a soft exhale, as if affirming it. They moved like shadows. No sirens, no uniforms, just two unmarked cars and a quiet nod between officers. Rachel helped Ivy pack the few things she'd brought into this new lifesome sketchbooks. The fleece blanket, the photograph of her mother. Maya added a new stuffed dog toy she'd picked up on the way, its soft ears already starting to curl from the summer heat. They let Ivy ride in the back seat with Valor, who sat up the entire trip, ears perked, eyes always trained on the road ahead. Ivy clutched the stuffed dog to her chest, but her free hand stayed tangled in Valor's fur. The highway lights passed like slow ghosts outside the windows. About 30 minutes in, she asked, "Will I still get to see you?" Maya looked back through the mirror. "I'll visit, as much as you want." "And what if he comes back?" Maya's voice didn't waver. "Then he'll have to go through me, through all of us, and Valor." A small nod. Then Ivy leaned her head against the dog and closed her eyes. Maya kept driving. In her peripheral vision, the girl's chest rose and fell, steady, for the first time in days. Cedar Falls smelled like pine and old rain, the kind of place where wind whispered through branches instead of wires, and mornings started with the shuffle of deer across gravel roads. Ivy had never seen so much sky. During the day, the safe house felt almost too quiet. Ivy spent hours near the wide back window, sitting cross-legged on the floor, sketchpad balanced on her knees. Her drawings shifted from gray boxes and shadowy figures to bird robins, jays, sparrows with oversized eyes and wings just learning to stretch. Rachel let her tape them to the wall. A whole flock slowly bloomed across the pale paint. Valor stayed nearby, always close enough to touch. When Ivy shifted, so did he. When she hummed a tune under her breath, half-forgotten melody about Starshy's ears would twitch. Maya took the guest room downstairs, though she never really slept. Every creak in the wood, every flicker of the porch light, her body stiffened like a loaded spring. The house had sensors now, a silent perimeter system installed by Brewer's men. Nothing loud, no sirens, just a soft pulse sent to Maya's burner phone if the outer barrier was breached. The fourth night was still and cold. Rain had threatened all afternoon, but never came. The air felt suspended, like the world was holding its breath. Ivy was curled up in bed with the fleece blanket and the stuffed dog Maya had given her. She was drawing again, this time a strange shape, half wing, half flame, before sleep finally tugged her eyelids down. Downstairs, Maya sat in the kitchen with a mug of tea that had gone cold 2 hours earlier. She was reading the same page of her report for the third time when her phone vibrated. Ping! Outer motion perimeter. North field. Her body went still. She didn't run, just stood up slowly, quietly, like fear had a sound she didn't want to wake. Valor was already at the top of the stairs, alert, silent. Maya reached the gun tucked in the kitchen drawer, not protocol, but necessary. She switched off the lights and moved to the front door. Her phone screen glowed faintly, showing the coordinates from the sensor, just past the tree line. Outside, the wind stirred but didn't howl. No car engines, no footsteps. She texted Brewer. One word. Motion. Then she waited. 1 minute. 2. Nothing. Upstairs, Ivy stirred. In her dream, something cracked. A door or a bone or a sky. Her hand twitched beneath the blanket, fingers curling into Valor's fur even though he was no longer beside her. Downstairs, the silence grew heavy. Balor's posture shifted. He moved to the front window and let out a low growl, not loud, just enough to curdle the edges of calm. Maya reached for the curtain and pulled it back half an inch. A figure stood at the edge of the woods. Gray hoodie, still as a stone. The porch light flickered once, then stilled. He didn't move, didn't walk forward, just stood there with something in his hand. It gleamed once. A lighter. Maya's lungs tightened. Her fingers curled around the gun. She counted: done, Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. At 23 seconds, the figure turned and vanished into the trees. Brewer arrived 20 minutes later with 2 deputies and a K-9 team. No tire tracks, no footprints clear enough to trace. Just a patch of grass flattened in the shape of a man's stance, and the faint smell of smoke that didn't belong. Ivy never woke during the sweep, but Valor returned to her side the moment it was over, curling against her spine like a second heartbeat. The next morning, Ivy found her drawing the one with wings and flame sand, quietly tore it in half. The wind shifted at 2:14 a.m. Not a howl, not a scream, just a breath, sharp, cold, threaded with pine and something metallic. Valor stirred first. His ears snapped forward before his body moved. Muscles tense, still. He padded to the window, low and soundless, nose pressing against the glass. Then he growled. Maya's eyes flew open. There it was, again motion, a blur past the outer fence. Not a deer, too fast, too deliberate. She was already up, boots on, gun holstered, flashlight in hand. The door creaked open, the air colder than it should have been. Through the trees, she caught a flash of gray, a hood, the same silhouette. Valor, she whispered. He didn't wait for more. Maya released him with a sharp signal. The German shepherd bolted across the yard like a shadow unchained. No bark, just whined behind him. Maya followed. The fence line broke into forest, brittle branches clawing the air. Leaves crackled under her boots as she weaved between trees, flashlight swinging. Ahead, Valor's growl turned savage. Then, a scream. Low, human, cut short. Maya ran toward the sound. She found them in a clearing bathed in moonlight. Graves lay on the ground, pinned hard beneath Valor's weight. One arm stretched outward toward something glinting in the grass, a hunting knife. Don't, Maya warned, voice like a wire pulled tight. Graves didn't move. Blood seeped from a gash on his forearm, where Valor had torn through his jacket. His chest heaved beneath the dog's growl, but there was something colder in his face than pain. Something resigned. She wasn't supposed to live, he said. The words hung in the clearing like a fog that didn't lift. Maya stepped closer, cuffs in hand, gun trained on his wrist as she kicked the knife farther away. What did you say? Graves looked up at her, face pale under the moonlight. His eyes were glassy, but not from fear, from memory. I saw her in the flames, he muttered. That night, screaming. Helena ran back in to get her. I told Glenda we had to go, but she didn't listen. You started the fire? He shook his head slowly. I just wanted the place gone. No names, no trail. We were supposed to disappear. But that kid, she didn't burn like she should have. Maya's hands trembled, just once, before the instinct returned. She snapped the cuffs onto his wrists. You're under arrest for attempted murder, arson, and kidnapping. Graves smirked faintly. Should have finished it when I had the chance. Valor snarled again, louder this time. The sound cut through the trees like judgment. Brewer arrived 10 minutes later with backup. The flashing red and blue beams of patrol cars sliced through the trees like judgment descending. Graves didn't resist. He didn't speak again. His face, so often, a mask of smirks and falsified warmth, was now slack, hollow, as if the unraveling of the lies he had so carefully built had taken the last pieces of him with it. 2 officers cuffed him wordlessly. No one offered pleasantries. Brewer's jaw clenched when he passed Maya. He gave her a small nod, not of approval, but of understanding, of weight shared. Then he turned his eyes toward Graves and said nothing. There was nothing left to say. As the sound of gravel under tires faded into the distance, Maya remained. She stood there in the clearing, motionless. The moon hung low, veiled behind drifting clouds, spilling only slivers of light onto the forest floor. It was just enough to catch the glint of the knife still lying in the grass where Graves had dropped it. The blade flickered softly, reflecting pale light, as if the metal itself were ashamed, trying to vanish into the soil. Maya moved toward it slowly, not to collect it as evidence, not to bag and tag it. She crouched beside it, stared at the weapon that had once cut through fear and intimidation, like a conductor's baton orchestrating terror. But now, under moonlight and after truth had finally spoken, it was just a dull object, a lie made solid. She picked it up by the handle with her gloved hand, the cold steel pressed into her palm like regret. She studied the smear of dried blood on the hilt valors. No doubt and felt a new wave of rage simmer beneath her ribs. But it wasn't wild or explosive. It was quiet, focused, the kind of fury that stays with you not to destroy, but to fuel. When she looked up, the trees seemed to lean in, holding their breath. Back at the safe house, everything was still, the kind of stillness that only comes after storms, not just the weather kind, but the soul-deep kind. The walls, freshly painted and still smelling faintly of lavender oil, offered no hint of what had just unraveled in the woods. But it lingered in the air anyway, like grief that hadn't spoken its name yet. Ivy lay curled in the corner of the couch, wrapped in her softest blanket, one arm around Valor's old collar that now hung from the doorknob. In her small hand was a piece of paper, the corner slightly crumpled, the edges marked by fingerprints and gentle persistence. A bird, one she had drawn herself, its wings stretched out, not like a bird just flying, but one taking off, leaving, free. Rachel sat in the kitchen, too tired to cry, too grateful to sleep, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of peppermint tea that had gone cold long ago. Beside her, on the dining table, lay the unopened folder Brewer had brought earlier, the one containing court orders, affidavits, and a single photo of Elena Frost holding baby Amelia eyes smiling, hair tousled from the wind, like someone caught mid-laugh instead of mid-sentence. Rachel couldn't bear to touch it. Not yet. Footsteps padded softly across the floor. Maya's. Her boots had been shed at the door. Dirt still clung to the cuffs of her jeans, and a faint scratch curved across her cheek like punctuation to a long, painful sentence. She walked past Rachel in silence. No explanations were needed. Just a nod. Just breath shared. In a space, finally safe. And behind her, as always, Valor followed. His gait was slower than usual, the chase having drained him. His fur was matted with earth and dew. His chest still rose in deep, tired waves. But when he reached Ivy, the weight in his body seemed to lift. He didn't nudge her. He simply curled beside her, resting his head gently near her shoulder like punctuation at the end of a lullaby. Ivy stirred, but did not wake. Her lips moved in her sleep. A whisper, a name, perhaps, or maybe just the echo of a world that had finally started making sense again. Outside, dawn was a rumor on the horizon. Maya stepped onto the porch, her breath visible in the chilled morning air. She held her phone in one-handed screen glowing faintly with the unsent text to Brewer. "Thank you, but this isn't over yet." She didn't send it. Instead, she looked up. Above her, stars began to fade. But one held on a single stubborn dot of silver, hanging just above the tree line. She remembered what Ivy had asked a few nights before. "Do dogs believe in heaven?" Rachel had answered, "If anyone knows what it feels like, it's them." And Maya believed that now more than ever. Because what Valor did tonight wasn't instinct. It wasn't training. It wasn't heroism in the way awards define it. It was something deeper. He hadn't just tracked a suspect. He had followed something more fragile than scent. He had followed fear, the kind that hides behind fake smiles and soft voices. He had heard the silence no one else could hear, and he had broken it. Later that morning, when Ivy finally stirred, it was with a strange calmness, like the body knowing, somehow, that the worst has passed even before the mind catches up. She sat up slowly. The blanket fell from her shoulders like a shell finally cracked open. Valor looked up at her, ears twitching. She placed her hand on his head. No words, no tears, just touch. Her fingers found his collar again. Then the paper, the bird. She smoothed it out and added one more line beneath the wings with a crayon Rachel had left on the coffee table. Sometimes flying means trusting someone else to carry you. Rachel came in and froze at the sight, not out of concern, but reverence. Maya entered soon after, carrying a bowl of warm oatmeal and a small cup of blueberries, just the way Ivy liked them. Ivy took the bowl, nodded once, and said the first words since everything ended. "Can we go see Mom's grave soon?" Silence. Then Maya's voice, low but certain. "We will. Together." Valor barked once quiet, short, as if offering approval. That afternoon, Rachel opened the folder Brewer left behind. Inside was a letter, Elena's, unfinished but unmistakable, addressed to My Amelia. Its final lines read, "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it as far as I hoped. But know this, I named you after hope itself. I named you Ivy, because even when everything around it crumbles, Ivy holds on. You are not broken. You are not alone. You are love with roots." Rachel pressed the paper to her chest and wept, not just for the years stolen or the wounds hidden, but for the chance to begin again. That night, Ivy and Maya sat together under a blanket on the porch. Valor lay beside them, his breathing deep and steady. Ivy pointed at the sky. "Which one's mine?" Maya looked up. "Yours?" "The star." Maya searched, then smiled. "That one, right above the tree, the one that doesn't blink." "M." Ivy nodded, then picked up a silver marker Rachel had given her earlier and drew a small star on the porch railing. Under it, in careful, uneven letters, she wrote, "Voice." She leaned against Maya's shoulder, whispered so softly even the wind had to lean in. "I didn't just find him. He found me." Valor raised his head at the sound of her voice. Then, satisfied, rested it once more. And for the first time in years, every human and dog slept without fear. Together, the sun crept in slowly, sifting through the lace curtains like gold dust, brushing over the floorboards, the edge of the patterned rug, the shelf of half-finished sketchbooks, and the little girl on the couch, curled like a comma beneath a quilt stitched with stars. Ivy stirred. She blinked up at the ceiling, soft breath fogging the quiet, her fingers still curled around the corner of the blanket. Her other hand instinctively reached downward and touched fur. Valor lay there, at her feet, asleep, chest rising in calm rhythm, his face turned slightly toward her, as if he'd spent the whole night listening for dreams too heavy to carry alone. His front paw twitched once, then stilled. The tip of his tail brushed her ankle like reassurance. Ivy smiled. But it was more than that. Something inside Hera feeling without language shifted. She sat up slowly. Her legs dangled over the edge. For a moment, she stared at them. Bare toes just above the floor. The way morning dust sparkled around them. A flicker of doubt crossed her brow. Then she pressed her heels down. The floor was cool, solid, real. She tightened her grip on the quilt, holding her breath, and then she stood. It wasn't perfect. Her knees trembled, her balance wavered. But she was standing. No wheels beneath her, no straps, no chair. Just her. One foot, a pause, another, a second step, then a third. The hallway was quiet. The scent of cinnamon lingered from the kitchen. Rachel must have started baking early. Somewhere in the back room, Maya's voice was a gentle murmur on the phone, too soft to make out. Ivy took another step. She didn't even realize she was crying until the fifth one. Warm tears slipping down her cheeks. Not from pain. Not this time. She reached the doorway to the kitchen just as Rachel turned around. Her mug paused mid-air, smile half-formed. Then the mug hit the table with a thud, untouched. Rachel's hand went to her mouth. "Ivy." Maya came in a second later, holding a folder. Her words died mid-sentence. Her breath caught. There she was, Amelia Frost, reborn in the body of a girl, once silenced by drugs and lies and darkness, standing in the middle of the room on her own two legs, hair a bit messy, Valor trailing close behind like a sentry risen from myth. "I just wanted to see the birds," Ivy whispered, pointing at the window where a few sparrows tapped at the glass looking for crumbs. Rachel dropped to her knees, tears spilling freely now. "Oh, honey-o, look at you." Maya stepped forward, her eyes rimmed red but glowing. She knelt, careful, and opened her arms. Ivy stumbled the last few steps and fell into them. They sat like that for a long time, three souls forming a circle that hadn't existed yesterday. Valor curled beside them, nose nudging Ivy's hand. and she scratched him behind the ear with a shaky little laugh. "I think he knew before I did," Ivy said. "He never stopped waiting." Maya nodded. "He always knows." Rachel reached up and brushed a curl from Ivy's forehead. "You're walking," she whispered, like if she said it too loud the moment might dissolve. "You're walking." Ivy leaned her head on Maya's shoulder and looked out the window, where sunlight glinted off the frost-covered trees. "I'm tired of sleeping through life," she said quietly. "I want to go outside today." Rachel's smile broke like morning. "Then we'll go outside." The sky over Millridge shimmered a soft, forgiving blue that morning, just cool enough to carry breath on the breeze, just warm enough to make the grass remember spring. Outside the small community hall, cars lined the street. Inside, the room smelled faintly of wood polish and blooming lilies. Rows of metal chairs had been unfolded with care, facing a modest podium framed by navy curtains. On the table beside it, polished to a shine, rested a velvet-lined case. And in that case, one small silver medal, a paw print etched in glass, the words "Guardian" always engraved along the edge. Maya stood near the side entrance, her hair tucked into a neat braid, nerves disguised beneath a practiced badge smile. Beside her, Ivy peeked through the crack in the door. Her blue dress fluttered around her knees, light as a sigh. Her hand gripped Maya's inner other, the leash. Valor stood tall. No vest, no harness, just his collar, brushed and clean, tags jingling like tiny bells. His eyes were calm, ears forward, as if he knew exactly what this day meant. "You ready?" Maya asked, soft. Ivy swallowed. Almost. Her hand trembled, not from fear, but the weight of something new being seen, truly seen, without the mask of a chair or a stranger's last name. This was her first time stepping into a room where no one pitied her, only honored her courage. Maya knelt. "You don't have to say anything. Just walk. That's enough." Ivy looked down at Valor, who gave a low, quiet woof, as if to say, "I'll match you, step for step." "I want to give it to him myself," Ivy said. Then they stepped out. Chairs turned. Uniforms stiffened. The murmur in the crowd died gently as people rose to their feet, not from obligation, but from something else entirely. A girl with sunlight on her shoulders and purpose in her steps walked slowly down the aisle. Her left hand held the leash. Her right held Maya's presence. She didn't stumble. She didn't look down. She walked like the world was hers again. Rachel was in the front row, tears blinking against a smile too wide to hold. The police chief stood by the podium, nodding slightly as Ivy approached. No one tried to take the spotlight. No speeches. Just a silence, thick with respect. Maya guided her to the small platform. Ivy stepped up on her own. Her fingers brushed the velvet box. She took a breath. Then she turned to Valor, who sat perfectly still. Head tilted. Tail thudding once against the wood floor. "This is for you," Ivy whispered. "For never giving up. Not once." She unclasped the ribbon, slid the medal gently over his neck. The paw print glinted in the light. Valor blinked slowly, then leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently against her chest, right over her heart. A sniffle rippled through the crowd. Someone clapped. Then another. And then the room filled with applause-not, loud, not explosive, but steady, like rain after a drought, like justice that had taken the long way home. Ivy turned, eyes glassy but proud. She gave a small wave. Maya's hand stayed at her back. Rachel mouthed, "You did it." Ivy looked down at Valor. "We did." The multi-purpose room of Maple Grove Elementariso. Recently, the stage for Safety Day in Whispered Alarm Shed, been transformed into a sea of hand-painted posters that read "Voices of Courage." Folding chairs creaked beneath rows of students in bright polos and mismatched sneakers. Teachers lined the walls like gentle sentries, trading smiles meant to calm their own nerves more than the children's plank. At the edge of the low platform, a single microphone waited. It looked far too tall for the 8-year-old girl, standing just off stage, clutching a note card the size of her palm. Ivy's blue dress, freshly pressed from the ceremony 2 weeks earlier, fell straight to her shins. A star-shaped pin gleamed at the collar. Guardian's friend, a miniature of Valor's medal. She smoothed the fabric once, then glanced down. Valor lay at her feet, ears pricked, gaze locked on her face the way a lighthouse follows only one horizon. Maya knelt beside them both. "It's just a story, kiddo. Yours. No one can tell it better." Ivy nodded, edging past the curtain's hem. Her knees wobbled, but held. At the first sight of her, the chatter in the room dimmed to a hush that felt almost holy. Principal Sutherland stepped to the podium. "Our final speaker needs no grand introduction. You know her courage. You saw her walk it across this very stage when she presented Valor with his award. Please welcome Ivy, also known as Amelia Frost." Applause. Not thunderous, but warm, rolling toward her like a tide she could choose to meet or retreat from. Ivy inhaled, stepped up, and watched Maya give a discreet thumbs up from the wings. The mic came to her chin. She rose on tiptoe, Valor shifting slightly to brace her calf with his shoulder. The room settled. Her voice was soft, a thread thrown into still air. "Hi." The speakers carried it to the back row. "I want to tell you something I learned." She glanced at her card but didn't read. "Sometimes..." She took a breath. Silence is the loudest cry. A teacher in row 3 pressed a hand to her mouth. Ivy continued, eyes moving across the sea of faces. "When I couldn't talk, people thought I was okay. But inside I was screaming. I just didn't know how to make real words." She rested a small hand on Valor's head. "He heard me anyway." Valor's tail thumped once, the sound soft but certain against the wood. "I think there are other kids who are quiet maybe in this room who feel like screaming but can't. I want you to listen, not just with ears, but with heart. Because heroes don't always wear badges." She smiled down at the dog. "Sometimes they bark." She stepped back, cheeks flushed, and whispered the cue Maya had suggested. "Ready?" Valor lifted his head, eyes shining, and released a single, crisp woof that echoed through the rafters like an exclamation point written in living sound. Laughter and applause rose at once louder than before, bright and crackling with relief. Ivy beamed. She did not hide behind the microphone or retreat off stage. She stood there, soaking in the noise that was no longer frightening. It was belonging. Maya wiped the corner of one eye. Rachel, near the doors, let her sketchbook drop against her hip, pages fluttering open to a half-finished illustration of a girl and a dog beneath a sky of oversized stars. Principal Sutherland returned to the mic, voice thick. "Thank you, Ivy, for reminding us that courage can be quiet and that all of us have the power to hear it." Isrek. The assembly ended in a rustle of chairs and chatter, but students drifted toward Ivy instead of the exits, forming a gentle half-circle. One boy in a red hoodie handed her a folded paper airplane. "I'm quiet sometimes, too," he muttered. Ivy opened it later to find a drawing of Valor labeled friend. As the room emptied, Maya joined Ivy and Valor at center stage. "You were brilliant." Ivy shrugged, suddenly shy. "It felt like flying." "And sounded like it too," Rachel added, arriving with both cats sketched on her forearm in graphite smudges. "Ready for home?" Ivy nodded. She walked off the stage under her own power hand on Maya's leash in the other. Behind them, the posters fluttered in the draft like applause that didn't want to end. Outside, the autumn sky had deepened to a violet twilight. Valor paused on the steps, nose to the wind. Ivy looked back at the building one last time and whispered, "Thank you for listening." No one heard it but the dog. He answered with another soft bark punctuation to a sentence finally spoken aloud. The next morning dawned slow and silver mist lingering over Cedar Falls like a secret. Rachel's mailbox, a dented teal thing at the end of the gravel drive, held only catalogs and bills most days. But today a single craft envelope sat on top, edges worn, the ink slightly blurred as if it had traveled through storms to get here. To Amelia Frost. C. O. Rachel Dane. Cedar Falls, Colorado. Rachel turned the envelope over. No return address, just a small pressed flower taped at one corner lavender, brittle with age. Her breath hitched. She knew without opening it this was not junk, not a casual hello. Inside, Ivy was at the kitchen table feeding bits of toast to Jupiter, the one-eyed cat. Valor lay beneath her chair, content after yesterday's exhausting applause. Maya still in off-duty sweats poured coffee with one hand and flagged a headline on her phone with the other. The screen door creaked. Rachel stepped in, shoes still dusty. Envelope clasped tight. Ivy. Her voice was softer than usual. Ivy looked up. Something in Rachel's tone made her straighten. What is it? Rachel set the envelope down. This came for you. It says, Amelia. A hush settled like falling ash. Ivy's fingers froze on the crust of bread. Valor, sensing the shift, rose and nudged her calf. Maya moved closer, eyes flicking over the handwriting. Do you want me to open it first? Ivy shook her head. I can. Her voice was small but steady. She peeled back the flap. Inside was a folded letter, handwriting looping and elegant, scented faintly of something warm cinnamon, maybe, or dried roses. A Polaroid slipped out. A younger Elena Frost, laughing under a crooked banner that read Shelter Harvest Festival. Beside her stood an older woman with braids streaked silver and a smile filled with gentle mischief. Ivy touched the photo's edges as though afraid it might crumble. The letter read, Dear Amelia, you won't remember me, but I remember you every single day. My name is Nancy Torres. Your mother and I shared night shifts at the River Creek shelter. She called you her moon because you lit her path even in darkness. After the fire, when everyone said you were gone, I refused to believe it. I went back every week with flyers, checked every clinic within 20 miles. I kept the lavender you once tucked into my pocket to make sad dreams smell nicer. I pressed it and promised I'd give it back to you. Yesterday, I saw a news clip. Brave girl honors hero dog. Your eyes were Elena's. Your smile, hers. I cried the way people cry when dawn finally comes. If your heart is ready, I would love to meet you. But if not, know this. Your mother fought for you until her last breath, and you were loved beyond measure then. Now, always. With all the hope left in me, Nancy. Silence swelled, thick and shimmering. Ivy traced the ink where Nancy had pressed hardest and the words loved beyond measure like she could feel the heartbeat beneath. Rachel wiped her cheek, unable to hide the tears. Maya laid a gentle hand on Ivy's shoulder. You're allowed to feel whatever you're feeling, she said. Ivy swallowed. She looked for me, she whispered, thumb brushing the lavender. All this time. Valor nudged the Polaroid, sniffed it, then rested his head on Ivy's thigh as if bridging past to present. Ivy exhaled, a sound half sob, half laugh. I want to meet her, she said, voice trembling but sure. I think it's another piece of Mom. Maya's smile was wet at the edges. Then we'll make it happen. Ivy folded the letter carefully, placed the lavender flower back inside, and sealed the envelope again, pressing the flap as if binding a promise. She set it on the windowsill where morning light pooled like a seed needing sun to sprout. Outside, the mist burned away, revealing a sky blue enough to believe in. The Pie Jar Diner sat on the outskirts of Cedar Falls, a retro silver railcar wrapped in neon that hummed faintly even at noon. Inside, vinyl booths gleamed red, a jukebox murmured doo-wop, and the smell of orange zest pie leaked from the kitchen doors. It was the kind of place built for unhurried conversations and refills that never emptied. Ivy pushed through the glass door with Maya's steady hand cupped at her elbow. Valor padded beside her, nails clicking on checkerboard tile. He drew curious smiles from a few patrons, but the waitress simply nodded. Maya had called ahead. Service dog? No questions. A woman rose from the rear booth. Gray-streaked braids. Eyes that looked like they had waited years to land on this moment. A pressed sprig of lavender lay on the table, exactly where a menu would sit. Ivy stopped a few feet away. Valor sat, guarding the quiet. For a breath, no one moved. Then Nancy Torres crossed the distance in 2 trembling steps and knelt no speeches. No caution, just arms opening the way dawn opens over a horizon. Ivy stepped forward, burying her face into a denim jacket that smelled faintly of herbs and wood smoke. She clutched fabric. Nancy's shoulders shook with a sound part sob, part laugh like a knot finally loosening. Maya looked away, blinking back the sting. She slid into the far end of the booth to grant them space while Valor stationed himself under the table, head resting on Ivy's sneakers. When they finally sat, hands still linked, words arrived in small, halting drops. I kept thinking you'd be taller, Nancy managed, wiping her cheeks with a napkin. I'm working on it, Ivy whispered. surprising herself with a shy smile. Nancy reached into a weather-worn satchel and pulled out a stack of photographs wrapped in twine. She laid them out like cards between coffee mugs. Elena Frost in a hammock, laughing so hard the picture blurred. Elena twirling a 4-year-old Amelia in a sundress under paper lanterns. Elena leaning over a shelter cot, brushing hair from a tiny sleeping face. Ivy's fingers hovered, then settled on the hammock photo. Sunlight streaked through leaves above her mother's grin. Ivy traced the outline of that smile, memorizing each curve like Braille. "Your mom used to laugh with her whole body," Nancy said softly. "If she found a joke, she'd share it with anyone in earshot, even stray dogs. You have her eyes, you know." Ivy's throat tightened. "Do you have any stories? Happy ones?" "Hundreds," Nancy said, voice cracking. Like the night of the Harvest Festival she sang off. Key insisted fireflies were really stars that came to dance close. You were her partner, wouldn't let go of her hand. Ivy shut her eyes, straining to pull sound from memory. A faint echo, humming beneath lantern light, cinnamon in the air, warmth of safety. She opened her eyes. Tears slipped anyway. Nancy brushed them away with a thumb. "She loved you fiercely. Never doubt that." The waitress drifted over, gently sliding pie slices onto the tab-apple crumble for Nancy, lemon cream for Ivy. Ivy tasted sweetness on her tongue and wondered if her mother had ordered the same on some forgotten night. Maya cleared her throat. "Nancy, if you're willing, we'd like you to be part of Ivy's support circle. Officially." Nancy nodded, eyes glistening. "Anything. I spent 4 years looking. I won't stop now." They spoke of little things after that. School projects, Rachel's cats, the mountain trail lined with wild lavender that Nancy promised to show them come spring. But mostly, they let silence do the talking, silence, filled with photographs passed back and forth, with the rustle of napkins dabbing tears, with Valor's steady breath under the table, reminding them all that the present was real and safe. When it was time to leave, Nancy pressed the lavender sprig into Ivy's palm. "For dreams," she said. Ivy slipped it into her pocket next to the guardian friend pin. She hugged Nancy once more longer this time, tighter. Outside, the neon sign flickered to life in the early dusk. Open 24. HRS. If promising there would always be time to come back, to say more, to heal. Valor led them to the car, head high, tail swinging. Ivy glanced over her shoulder. Nancy stood in the doorway, hand raised, a hopeful silhouette framed by pie-warm light. Ivy waved back, lavender and photographs pressing against her heart, and thought, stars dance close after all, because one of them had just stepped out of the dark to find her. Night settled softly over Cedar Falls, draping the pines in velvet shadow and pinning a scatter of winter-bright constellations high above the safe house porch. A single lantern glowed on the railing, painting arcs of amber across the wooden boards. The air smelled of cedar chips and the faint citrus of Rachel's evening tea. Ivy sat cross-legged on a woven blanket, shoulders wrapped in her fox and moon quilt. Rachel rocked beside her in the old wicker chair, its slow creak matching the metronome of crickets in the grass. Valor lay at Ivy's back warm, reassuring Waitchen resting on his paws, eyes half closed but watchful. They had been quiet for a long time, each listening to the hush between wind gusts, to the way the trees answered one another like distant relatives on the same phone call. When Ivy finally spoke, her voice was a thread of sound, delicate and earnest. "Rachel, do dogs believe in heaven?" Rachel stopped the chair with a gentle heel and looked out at the stars before answering, as though searching for the truest words in their silver light. "If anyone knows what heaven feels like," she said, "it's them." Ivy frowned softly, turning that answer over. "Why?" "Well," Rachel continued, sipping her tea, "dogs don't worry about tomorrow. They don't regret yesterday. They love with everything they have in the very moment they're given. Maybe heaven is just that feeling, forever." Valor shifted, offering a quiet huff as if politely noting his agreement. Ivy smiled, reaching back to scratch the warm fur behind his ear. Above them, the Milky Way stretched like spilled sugar across deep sapphire. Ivy's gaze found Orion first. She always looked for the belt because it felt neat and orderly in a sky that sometimes made her dizzy. But tonight her eyes drifted to a different patch. A modest star low in the east that pulsed faintly. Not the brightest, but stubborn in its glow. She drew her knees closer. "Do you think my mom is up there?" Rachel followed her gaze. "I think the people we love find places in the sky so we can still look up and talk to them." Ivy exhaled through her nose, half sigh, half laugh. "Mom said stars were fireflies that got to stay." She paused. "I almost forgot that story until today." Rachel's chair creaked again, rocking. Funny how memories come back when we make space for them. Silence settled once more, comfortable and whole. Somewhere down the hill, an owl offered its low question to the dark. The wind shuffled pine needles in reply. Ivy closed her eyes and let the sounds wrap around her like extra blankets. After a while, she rose, careful not to disturb Valor, and padded inside. When she returned, she carried her sketch pad and a tin of colored pencils. She sat beneath the lantern and flipped to a blank page, the paper pale as moonlit snow. Rachel watched as Ivy selected a blue so dark it was almost black and began shading the page from edge to edge's slow strokes, patient. When the sky was filled, she chose white and carved a single 5-point star in the center, pressing hard enough to leave grooves. She added faint lines around itiny rays of light. Finally, she picked up a fine-tip pen. At the bottom of the page, in neat block letters, she wrote one word, "Mom." She held it up for Rachel to see, eyes shining in the lantern glow. "I think she's listening now." Rachel's throat pinched. She leaned forward and pressed a kiss to Ivy's temple. "I know she is." Ivy slipped the drawing into a plastic sleeve safe from weather, safe from time, and walked to the porch railing. With careful fingers, she clipped it beside the wind chimes, where the lantern light could find it and any breeze could set it swaying. Valor stood, tail brushing Ivy's hip. He lifted his muzzle toward the night sky and, in a soft exhale that was almost a sigh, released a single low bark. Not loud enough to wake anyone, just enough to mark a promise between earth and the quiet heavens. Ivy rested her head against the dog's shoulder, quilt trailing like a comet's tail. She stared up at her lone star, outlined in graphite and hope, and whispered so small the words barely left her lips. "Thank you for finding me. M2. Above, the modest star seemed to answer its flicker, steady, unapologetic. Eternaland, Ivy. Wondered if maybe that was heaven after all. The certainty that someone you love can still glow for you, even when the sky feels too big to understand." She turned back toward the door, Valor pacing in protective half circles around her, Rachel waiting with open arms and warm tea. Behind them, the drawing swayed gently, catching lantern light like a lighthouse signal. And the name beneath the star, Mom, gleamed in fresh ink, anchored across the dark like a point on a map that could never again be lost. Late winter sunlight spilled across Rachel's studio like warm milk, settling over the scatter of pencils, watercolor pans, and half-empty tea mugs that dotted every flat surface. Outside, cedar branches knocked on the shutters in soft, polite intervalses, if asking permission to witness what was happening inside. Ivy sat cross-legged on the wide farmhouse table, a graphite smudge on her cheek and a blanket puddled around her hips. In front of her lay a thick stack of cold-pressed pages clamped with binder clips. Their top sheet was bare, except for a pencil title, "The Bark That Found My Voice." Story by Ivy, Amelia Frost. Pictures by Rachel Dane. Valor sprawled beneath the table, tail sweeping slow arcs each time Ivy swung her feet. Every so often he lifted his head to check on her progress. Then, satisfied, rested his muzzle on crossed paws. Rachel moved around the room in quiet figure eights, selecting pigments and scratching color keys onto scrap paper. "We'll keep the palette gentle," she said, half to herself, half to Ivy. "Soft blues for the scary parts, gold wash for the hope." Ivy tapped the title page with a freshly sharpened pencil. "And green for courage," she added, remembering Valor's collar. "Green for courage," Rachel echoed, smile widening. They had spent the morning storyboarding, tiny thumbnail sketches, marching across sticky notes. 1. A hallway filled with children and one desperate bark. 2. A silent girl slipping a note into a dog's collar. 3. Blue-white hospital light revealing poisoned veins. 4. First wobbly steps across a sun-streaked floor. 5. Guardian medals and applause that felt like rain after drought. 6. A star pinned to the sky, with a single word: Mom. Each scene would occupy a spread, Rachel explained. The left side carrying Ivy's words in large friendly type, the right holding an illustration that breathed alongside them. Nothing cramped, nothing rushed. Space enough for hush and heartbeat. Ivy wrote in careful block letters, tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth as she sounded out sentences. She had insisted on doing the first draft herself. It has to sound like me before it sounds like a book. Rachel only corrected the occasional spelling, never tone. When they reached the page about the note, "Help me, she lies." Ivy hesitated. "Should it be exactly like that?" she asked, voice softer. Rachel set down her brush. "Only if you want it to be." Ivy considered, then nodded. Kids need to know sometimes the biggest words are small. She penciled the line, leaving room around it for Rachel to paint a close-up of Valor's collar, note flapping like a tiny flag of defiance. Mid-afternoon, Maya arrived with sandwiches wrapped in butcher paper and newsprint. She paused in the doorway, soaking in the scene. Ivy hunched over a page. Rachel bent like a lighthouse over her shoulder. Valor snoring softly beneath. "How's the masterpiece?" Maya asked. "Half a sandwich away from greatness," Rachel said, accepting turkey on rye. Ivy held up a page she'd just finished scripting. Chapter 4 Brave, Enough to Move. The sentence underneath read, "My legs listen to my heart before they listen to my mind." Maya blinked hard, then offered a crooked grin. "Pretty sure your editor is going to steal that line for motivational posters." They ate cross-legged on the floor, plates balanced on sketch pads. Ivy fed Valor crusts that he caught mid-air with gentle snaps. Between bites, they discussed dedication pages. "Should we thank the fireflies?" Ivy asked. "Definitely," Rachel said. "And the pie diner lady who never let your cocoa cup run dry. And Nancy. And the kids who are quiet," Maya added softly. "And one dog who listened when the world didn't." As dusk melted purple against the windows, they returned to work. Rachel laid a fresh sheet on her light box, tracing Ivy's pencil lines with fluid ink. The scene showed Ivy in her blue dress, medal aloft, Valor at her side. She added a wash of lemon honey glow around them, hope made visible. Ivy began drafting the final spread. She wanted the words to feel like the hush after a story read by flashlight under blanket, sleepy but shining. She wrote, erased, wrote again, until only one line remained. "Even if you whisper, someone is listening." She stared at it a long time. "Is it enough?" she asked. "It's everything," Rachel said, voice catching. Maya slipped an arm around Ivy's shoulders. Valor rose, sensing a shift, and placed one paw gently on Ivy's lap as though signing off on the manuscript himself. They propped the finished page on the easel, lantern light glazing wet ink. Outside, the first stars pricked through Twilly humble, steadfast. Ivy leaned her cheek against Valor's head, quilt sliding from her shoulders. "Think kids will hear it?" Valor answered with a quiet bark. Just on a end it rippled through the studio, small but certain. Rachel dipped her brush into green courage green and, with a single stroke, underlined the closing sentence. Hope had a color now, and soon it would have pages, too. The first envelope arrived 3 weeks after The Bark That Found My Voice hit the shelves of the town library. It came on pale pink stationery, the cursive shaky and oversized. "Dear Ivy, I didn't know you, but reading your book felt like you knew me. I'm 10, and my stepdad says boys shouldn't cry. I cry anyway. Your dog listened. Mine will too someday. Thank you for being brave first. Elliot." Ivy found it tucked into the library's return slot, clipped to a copy of her book like a secret handshake. She read it on the porch steps, Valor's head in her lap, tears sliding free before she could hide them. Maya took the note, smoothed the crease, and slipped it into a new 3-ring binder labeled Quiet Voices. A week later, a padded envelope arrived from Minnesota. Inside were 8 construction paper cards, glitter glued into lopsided paw prints. "Your story helped me talk to my counselor. We all woofed like Valor at recess. Room 4, Miss Jensen's class." Ivy laughed until she hiccuped, wiping sparkles from Valor's fur while Rachel fetched the vacuum. Maya punched holes along the envelope's edge and snapped it into the binder. By mid-spring, the binder had grown thick. Letters spilled in from foster homes, reservation schools, a children's cancer ward in Boise. Some were typed by occupational therapists. Others were scribbled in marker, words, sun-bleached and water, stained from pockets. One boy drew Valor wearing a cape. Another included a photo of himself with a rescue beagle labeled, "My Hero." Ivy read each aloud at the kitchen table in evening light, voice trembling on lines like, "I never told anyone my uncle hurt me until your book said quiet kids still matter. And I thought I was alone. Turns out I was just waiting for a bark." Every letter ended the same way. A thanks, a promise to speak, a child discovering volume in their own chest. Without fail, Ivy cried softly, openly, not ashamed. Valor nudged her elbow each time, nose warm, tail sweeping comfort against her calf. Maya kept tissues in her pocket and clear plastic sleeves ready. She'd uncap the 3-hole punch, press down with a practiced rhythm, and file the messages behind rainbow tabs: hope, courage, found. "Someday," she said, "we'll need a bookshelf just for these." Rachel began painting a mural on Ivy's bedroom wall. Scores of envelopes taking flight, each transforming into birds that soared toward a sky of oversized stars. Ivy joined her, adding tiny lines of text on the wings, miniature quotes from the letters. "Even if you whisper, Valor hears me too. I'm not invisible anymore." As summer neared, a heavy package arrived addressed to Amelia Frost and Valor, certified friend. Inside lay a blanket hand-quilted by volunteers at a women's shelter in New Mexico, each square embroidered with a paw print and a child's first initial. There was a note: "When we wrap this around new kids, we'll tell them about the dog who listened and the girl who found her voice." Ivy insisted the blanket live in Valor's bed. The shepherd accepted the gift with a dignified huff, then promptly dragged it beside Ivy's desk as she answered more mail. One evening, after tucking the latest letters away, Maya closed the bulging binder and rested her palm on the cover. "You realize," she said gently, "each one of these is a life nudge toward the light because you were brave enough to speak." Ivy traced the raised letters on the spine: quiet voices, Volume 1, and smiled through glistening eyes. "Then we'd better keep making room," she whispered. "There are a lot more whispers out there." Valor lifted his head, barked once soft but certain, and Ivy giggled, tears and laughter now sharing the same space without contradiction. The binder clicked shut, but the story did not. Outside the screen door, firefly stars that chose to dance close speckled the dusk, tiny punctuation marks on the sentence Ivy had sent into the world. And in the hush that followed, you could almost hear it. 1,000 quiet voices gathering strength enough to speak, carried forward on the wag of a guardian's tail. Snow had come early to Cedar Falls, drifting down in slow, deliberate spirals that made the whole valley look hush-painted. Through frosted windows, Rachel's living room glowed gold with lamplight and the steady crackle of a fire. The scent of pine, cinnamon, and orange peel simmered in the air, holiday notes stitched together like a familiar song. The Christmas tree stood near the picture window, branches dusted with fresh needles that still whispered of forest wind. Its lights twinkled amber and white, reflecting in glass baubles painted with foxes and tiny watercolor birdchan-made gifts from Ivy's pen pals around the country. Near the top, a felt ornament shaped like Valor's head grinned lopsidedly, tongue out, ear half chewed by Jupiter the cat. Ivy knelt on the rug, quilt wrapped around her shoulders. On the floor beside her lay a small wooden star bear, save for one word burned carefully into its grain in Ivy's meticulous block letters: voice. She turned it over in her hands, thumb tracing each charred groove, remembering the way her own voice had once felt buried under lidocaine and silence, locked inside fears no one could see. Now it pulsed warm in her chest, as real as her heartbeat. Maya appeared from the hallway carrying a step stool. "Ready to crown the tree?" Ivy nodded, rising on steady legs. She climbed the stool, Valor close enough to steady her balance with a gentle nudge if she swayed. At the highest branch still within reach, she looped the twine and let the star settle among the lights. It swayed faintly, catching the glow, throwing little shards of gold onto the ceiling. Rachel turned off the lamp. Only the tree remained bright, a constellation pulled indoors. The star ornament glimmered voice quiet yet unignorable. Stepping down, Ivy settled onto the hearth rug. Valor curled beside her with a canine sigh, heavy head landing across her lap. She ran her fingers through his fur, gaze fixed on the star. Maya sank onto the couch, mug of cocoa warming her palms. Rachel perched on the arm, camera quietly capturing the tableau but never intruding. Snow feathered against the window panes, silent punctuation marks, The fire popped. Ivy leaned close to Valor's ear, breath stirring his whiskers. In a voice only he could truly understand, she whispered, "I didn't just find you. You found me." Valor's tail thumped once. Soft. Steady. Ivy pressed her cheek to his head, eyes shining not with tears this time, but with reflected light from her star. For a long moment they stayed like that, a girl and her guardian, stitched together by bark and whisper, by courage and green, paint hope. Behind them, the binder of letters rested on the coffee table, ribbon tied and growing thicker still. Beside it lay a single advance copy of their book, scheduled for a second printing after holiday demand surprised every publisher's forecast. Yet none of that glitter mattered more than this: the tree, the star, the warm weight of a dog who had once cut through a hallway's din with a single world-changing bark. Rachel snapped one final photo of the room washed in tree-light, ivy-green quilt, silver fur against pale blue dress, the star above reading, voice and lowered the camera with a smile like dawn. Outside, the moon climbed higher, setting diamonds on the snowdrifts. If someone had lingered near the window that night, they might have thought the scene was painted. But inside, every heartbeat proved it lived. Hope, found and finding, rustling softly like pine needles in winter hush. And beneath the tree, the star ornament swayed again, as if agreeing with the quiet confession that had just taken flight in the flicker of fire and fairy lights. Stories like Ivy and Valor's remind us that love doesn't always speak sometimes. It listens. In the quiet bond between a child and her dog, we see what loyalty truly means. German shepherds, with their steady gaze and brave hearts, carry something timeless, a devotion that doesn't waver, even in the darkest moments. They don't ask for much, just a place beside us, and a chance to protect the ones they love. If you've got a dog curled up at your feet or waiting for you by the door, maybe now's a good time to listen to their story too. There's a beautiful resource I came across not long ago, something that helps deepen that connection we already feel. It's not flashy, just thoughtful, and it gave me new ways to understand the dog beside me. If that sounds like something you'd appreciate, I'd be happy to point you to it. No pressure, just a gentle nudge from one dog lover to another. Because at the end of the day, these loyal souls don't just guard our homes, they guard our hearts. And they deserve to be understood just as deeply as they understand us.